Today, large intermediaries establish trust in our economy, and they control the movement, the storage, the allocation of money and assets. The status quo, however, is ripe with inefficiencies. Think about it. Billions of people today are unbanked, meaning they can't store and move value and build wealth. The problem starts with identity. Without a way to prove who these people are, these nameless people can't access financial services and are more at risk than those of us who are fortunate enough to have that access. Billions of people in the global south lack secure rights to property because land titles are patchy and incomplete and governments are corrupt. This means no economic rights and limited upward mobility. It's a problem for enterprises too. The costs of contracting, establishing trust, and moving value have not been impacted much by the internet's first era, and therefore obstacles to entrepreneurship and economic growth are profound. Funding a new business means only calling a VC or local bank, limiting options for investment. Problems also arise when the incentives of managers don't align with those of business owners, creating a moral hazard, as it's called. This agency problem is responsible for many frauds and all kinds of bad behavior in our economy. In this course, we'll address these many challenges of the status quo and discuss how crypto assets, smart contracts, new identity systems, and the new financial business models can help overcome them. How? Well, by empowering individuals, entrepreneurs, and businesses with the technology tools they need to help level the playing field and participate in the value that they create. Transacting on blockchain can help us bring about a future that we believe is faster, fairer, and more distributed than the world that we inhabit today. Hello, my name is Don Tapscott, and I'd like to welcome you to this course, Transacting on the Blockchain. Here's a quick rundown of the topics that we're going to cover. First, we're going to do a deep dive into 7 types of crypto assets and what it means to tokenize an asset. You'll also learn about the phenomenal rise in popularity of ICOs, or initial coin offerings. Now, as an aside, we think the term ICO is really a misnomer. These aren't necessarily coins or cryptocurrencies that are being offered, but rather digital assets that can represent many things, such as ownership in a company, access to a network, carbon credits, or even art. A better term would be token generation events, but because ICO is commonplace, we'll stick with that term. Then we'll teach you about smart contracts. You'll understand what they are, how they work, and why they're so important. You'll also be able to identify the 4 phases of a deal cycle. We're going to examine, with different examples, what people are doing with smart contracts and learn just how much they're benefiting from this technology. Then we're going to discuss identity. This was one of the most eye-popping areas for me. Really, our understanding of our current system for establishing and managing our identities. You'll be able to describe at least 5 problems with this identity system and explain the value of what we call a self-sovereign identity system. Finally, we'll be able to rethink the current financial services industry. You'll be able to describe 6 inefficiencies in the current financial services industry and how they can be improved with blockchain. We'll identify 8 core functions of this sector and how blockchain will disrupt each one and create opportunities to improve each one. And finally, you'll be among the few who can explain triple entry accounting on distributed ledgers. We think it's all pretty exciting. If you've no prior experience with blockchain, I recommend starting with the first course, our first course, Introduction to Blockchain Technology. Before we dive into these exciting lessons on transacting on the blockchain, please join me in the next video. I want to share with you some more details, a bit about me, my career, and to introduce my co-instructor, Alex Tapscott. We'll explain why we're so passionate about this technology. Hello, I'm Don Tapscott, and I've spent my career studying how digital technologies can transform our lives. I've written a lot of books about this, 16 in total, such as The Digital Economy and also Wikinomics, How Mass Collaboration Changes Everything. I'm also the co-author of the best-selling book, Blockchain Revolution, How the Technology Behind Bitcoin and Other Cryptocurrencies is Changing the World. As well, I'm an adjunct professor at the business school INSEAD. And we're thrilled to have a couple of minutes to talk to you, to talk about what we're doing and what we hope to do with this course.
Hi, I'm Alex Tapscott, and I'm also the co-author of Blockchain Revolution, which was published in 2016 and remains to this day the best-selling book on blockchain, translated into over 15 languages. Harvard Business School's Clay Christensen told us that Blockchain Revolution is the book on how to survive and thrive in this next wave of technology-driven disruption. Tim Draper, the well-known venture capitalist of Draper Associates, told us that this book has the predictive quality of Orwell's 1984 and the vision of Elon Musk. And Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, told us that the book has had an enormous impact on the evolution of blockchain in the world. That's quite high praise, and we're deeply humbled by all of it. So it's clearly got a lot of people thinking about the power of this technology to transform both business and society.
Wow, those quotes are pretty humbling. So CEOs and government leaders started asking us some big questions about blockchain. How will this technology transform specific industries? What are the real challenges facing blockchain development today? How can we overcome those challenges? How will blockchain change the nature of the enterprise, the way we manage our companies? What will it mean for government architecture and the creation of services of public value? And how could this technology help us solve some big problems, such as climate change? So a couple of years ago, we founded the Blockchain Research Institute. This is a think tank dedicated to answering these big questions. We're conducting the definitive investigation of blockchain's impact on business, government, and society. And overall, we have more than 100 projects underway. This is a big multi-million-dollar program.
We also developed this specialization of 4 courses, and much of these 4 courses are informed by the work that we did in those 100 projects. And much of the work that we have done to date is going to be available to all of you. We're also collaborating with INSEAD and Coursera to share what we've learned thus far, and thus what we think is important for you to know. There are many big ideas we'll cover throughout this specialization. First, we are witnessing one of the largest transformation of assets in human history, from an analog to a digital medium. Bitcoin is but only one type of digital asset, and we're going to look at the other 6 types of crypto assets, the ones that we can create, record, and trade on the blockchain. And this ability to trade assets peer-to-peer on the blockchain without going through a bank or some other intermediary is already disrupting the financial services sector profoundly. We'll look at that and the many other opportunities in the finance industry.
Second is the idea of self-sovereign identity. That's about our right to establish our own digital identities. Self-sovereign identities can't be given or taken away by any central administrator. They're enforceable in any context, in person and online, and anywhere in the world, and they let us capture and control our own data and manage our own identities to benefit us and our lives. We no longer need to give up our data to big internet landowners, such as Alibaba, Facebook, or Google, just to use their websites. And we can store our data in a virtual black box that moves around with us. And we can sell that data or do whatever we want with it if we choose to do so.
Third is the idea of smart contracts. A smart contract is a piece of special purpose code executing a complex set of instructions on the blockchain. It's a means of codifying the terms of a deal in software. Now, this could be a business deal between producers and consumers, or it could be a social pact between a government and its citizens. What's important here is this: smart contracts ensure contractual compliance. They hold parties accountable. The blockchain provides a high degree of certainty as to the outcome of these agreements. Oh, and smart contracts self-execute without the need for intermediaries like banks or governments. And frankly, we've never had that kind of assurance before.
Fourth is the idea of decentralized business models. These are business models distributed across a blockchain network, not centralized in a traditional corporation. They can be fully autonomous too, meaning no humans involved. There's big potential for true peer-to-peer models like ride-sharing without Uber as a middleman taking fees. Owners of driverless cars will someday be able to put their autonomous vehicles to work. So even the big disruptors can be disrupted by this new technology.
And fifth is the idea of the ledger of things. We're already seeing applications of this new internet of devices and things. Soon, though, most transactions will happen between devices and not between people. Consider the smart home. Homeowners are adding smart devices such as thermostats and solar panels, and soon potentially trillions of devices will be connected to the internet, doing everything from driving us around to keeping our house lit to managing our affairs and managing our health information. These devices need to be resistant to hacking. They need to be able to communicate value, such as money or assets like electricity peer-to-peer. Consider electricity. If you imagine that your neighbor's home is generating energy from a solar panel and you've got a device that needs to buy that electricity, then those two devices need a way to be able to contract, bargain, and execute a payment peer-to-peer. It's not going to happen through the Visa network. It can only happen on the blockchain.
We've given you a glimpse of crypto assets, digital identity, smart contracts, new business models, and the ledger of things. These are all themes of the modules ahead of you. We're just pleased to be working with INSEAD and Coursera to share all this information with you, and we're happy that you're joining us. If you've got questions for us, then just post them on the discussion forum. And remember, technology alone doesn't solve problems, people do. It doesn't create prosperity, people do. And our hope is that you'll connect with each other, identify your common interests, and let's solve some big problems together.
This is an overview of a topic fundamental to the blockchain revolution underway: crypto assets. First, we'll talk about the remarkable growth of these assets. Then we'll run through the 7 types of crypto assets you'll learn more about in the lessons to come. A crypto asset is a digital asset created, managed, and traded on a blockchain. Furthermore, crypto assets are just one facet of the financial services revolution. Asset classes with notional values of trillions of dollars, stocks, bonds, collectibles, and currencies, just to name a few, could be transformed from analog to digital, and in the process force companies, governments, investors, and citizens to confront a brave new world. This new asset class includes some familiar elements: cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin, blockchain's first killer app, platform tokens such as Ethereum. But there are other asset types to watch, and we will explore each in detail over the coming lessons. crypto assets have exploded in value. The entire crypto asset market was worth only $9 billion when we first published Blockchain Revolution in May of 2016. Had it been a public company, it would have barely cracked the S&P 500 index. But by January 2018, it had passed $800 billion, in the same ballpark as the market cap of Microsoft at the time. Even after a significant sell-off, the market today is still worth over $130 billion, more than 13 times larger than just a couple years ago. Crypto assets have caught the imagination of developers and entrepreneurs. Regulators, central banks, and non-government organizations have taken note, and so have the media and the investing public. These digital assets and the underlying blockchain technology are now increasingly mainstream. Enthusiasts are euphoric. Some Nobel laureates are skeptical. Old-school billionaires have come down with indigestion. Ethereum's inventor, Vitalik Buterin, asked whether the crypto asset market had earned its value. Yes, there is a significant level of activity, but is it enough to warrant the size of the market? Buterin tweeted, "How many unbanked people have we banked? And how much value is really stored in smart contracts, doing anything truly interesting?" Yes, there is a lot of hype. For every crypto asset that succeeds, many will surely fail. Scammers have had a negative impact, and the industry does face some serious challenges. How will these technologies scale? How will incumbents react? And what will governments do? We believe this industry needs sound regulation to protect investors from fraud. Scammers must be held accountable, and people who want to invest need to know the rules of the road. But bad regulation can stifle innovation. Even rules made with the best intentions can have unintended and sometimes negative consequences. In some countries, multiple regulators with overlapping mandates are sending conflicting messages. Jurisdictions like Switzerland and Singapore have emerged as favorable spots for startups. Their local economies have seen positive outcomes. About 3,000 jobs were created in the so-called Crypto Valley around Zug and Zurich in Switzerland in just the past 2 years. These small and nimble jurisdictions have capitalized on this new industry, but they remain the exception, not the norm. For now, the general lack of regulatory clarity has created uncertainty. There are big implementation challenges to overcome, but if we look beyond the hype and mania, if we look beyond the fear and doubt, we will see that something profound is happening. Bitcoin was the first move in a long campaign to create a brand new technology stack for the internet. Blockchain is the first native digital medium for value, and it's limited really only by our imaginations. Some inventors have imagined a whole new asset class. We think there are at least 7 types, and you'll learn more about each in the upcoming lessons. The first are cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Zcash, and Metronome. Second are protocol tokens like Ether, EOS, Icon, and Aeon. Third are utility tokens like Golem and Spank. Remember, we'll study each of these asset types in separate lessons. Fourth are securities tokens like crypto equities and crypto bonds. Fifth are natural asset tokens, which represent a claim on a physical asset in the real world, like say a bar of gold. Sixth are crypto collectibles like CryptoKitties, which you'll enjoy learning about. And finally, there are crypto fiat currencies and stablecoins. These include the FedCoin proposal, Singapore's project Ubin, and DAI, spelled D-A-I. We are witnessing one of the largest transformations of wealth in human history. Value is moving, really for the first time, from analog assets to digital ones. Have we witnessed a bubble already, and will there be more to come? Possibly. The dot-com era of boom and bust hurt those looking to make a quick buck, but it sorted out the sustainable business models from the unsustainable ones. And something more important happened. Talent shifted to this new area of the economy. The excitement of the internet era led to billions of dollars of investment in its infrastructure. But blockchain differs from the internet in 2 fundamental ways. First, the internet was a free utility. Early pioneers built it with really little financial incentive. On the alternative, blockchain provides potentially huge rewards for creators of widely used platforms and apps. Blockchain creators and early adopters can participate financially in the growth of the second era of the internet. Because of that, there is no one blockchain. There is an explosion of competing, overlapping, complementary platforms, and all are driven by incentives. And here's the second major way that blockchain is different from the internet. Blockchain is tackling value industries like financial services and supply chains. These are far larger than information industries like media and publishing, and so the impact of blockchain will be that much greater. And so potentially will the aggregate value. Sometimes the saying goes, we need a little irrational exuberance to build the future. In this video, we take a closer look at cryptocurrencies, the first of 7 types of crypto assets. Let's review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. So what impact have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin had on the financial scene? When blockchain revolution came out in May of 2016, Bitcoin was worth around $7 billion. Today, it's worth nearly 10 times that. Bitcoin is the workhorse of the cryptocurrency world. So where does Bitcoin store this nearly $100 billion of value? It stores it on the most robust computer network ever formed. It's a secure payment system enabling billions of dollars in transactions daily. Bitcoin is a reserve currency for the growing crypto asset world. That means that you can use it as a final settlement when it's time to cash out. Still, Bitcoin is a favorite punching bag for almost every armchair analyst. It's a bit of a paradox. Bitcoin's meteoric rise in price makes it easier, not harder, for new investors to justify buying some. It's become too big to ignore. And the bigger Bitcoin gets, the more uses it has. In 2018, the Lightning Network and other scaling solutions were launched. With these, Bitcoin may fulfill the promise of its biggest fans and end the need for traditional go-betweens. Consider how some of the world's biggest banks have reacted. When blockchain revolution went to print, most banks saw some potential for blockchain, but they dismissed Bitcoin out of hand. Jamie Dimon, chief executive officer of JP Chase, was still calling Bitcoin a fraud in 2017. He has since changed his mind a little. JP Morgan's annual report that year acknowledged the risk cryptocurrencies could pose to its business. Goldman Sachs invested in the blockchain startup Circle, and Circle later acquired Poloniex, one of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges. So Goldman Sachs also sees risks and opportunities in these crypto assets. The big banks are changing their tune about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin has already had a huge impact on culture and the economy. It's the cryptocurrency that's launched 1,000 ships. But newer cryptocurrencies like Zcash have emerged, and those focus on privacy. These and other so-called privacy coins build upon Bitcoin's principles, but add privacy into the mix. Interestingly, JP Morgan integrated Zcash's core privacy technology into its own Quorum blockchain. Quorum has apps in a range of asset classes and business functions. It seems that the bank's tech experts understood the potential of blockchain maybe before its management did. Another intriguing cryptocurrency is Metronome. It is issued on the Bitcoin network as well as on Ethereum, Ethereum Classic, and others. And what makes Metronome so interesting is users can import and export it across chains. Such interoperability is a big challenge, but it's also a big opportunity. And Zcash and Metronome also joined Dash, Monero, and others who are vying for cryptocurrency market share. But remember, currencies are just the beginning. Up next, we look at Ethereum and platform tokens. This video is on protocol tokens, the second of 7 types of crypto assets. Let's review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Protocol tokens, like Ether, are connected to a platform like Ethereum. At first glance, Ethereum and Bitcoin seem like 2 sides of the same coin, so to speak. Cryptocurrencies designed to function as cash for the internet. That's true when it comes to Bitcoin, but Ethereum is different. Ethereum is a blockchain platform built to run dApps, where dApps is short for decentralized applications. dApps are powered by smart contracts, software that automates the logic of a business agreement. dApps help cut out the middleman. Bankers, brokers, lawyers, and escrow agents are no longer needed really to guarantee the execution of an agreement. Ethereum was really still an idea when we were writing the Blockchain Revolution book. But today, Ether, the native token of the Ethereum network, has a market value of nearly $15 billion. And Ethereum is the leading platform for initial coin offerings, or ICOs. A project can use an ICO to raise millions of dollars peer-to-peer from investors around the world. Ethereum is, in many respects, the first automated investment bank for the digital economy. And so far, dozens of distributed applications have launched on the Ethereum network. They've raised billions of dollars, and about 70% of all dApps are still running on the Ethereum blockchain. Large enterprises like Microsoft, JP Morgan, and BP formed the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance in 2017 to build out this ecosystem. The network's growing reach gives it some staying power. Some dApps have made lots of progress. Most others have faded or are stalled. For every great startup that changes the world, many will be forgotten. The success of any one application is less important to platforms like Ethereum than being the foundation for the next big thing. When more dApps are built on a network, demand for the network's protocol token grows. Think of Ethereum as the city grid, and the dApp as the car. Ether is the gas in crypto terms. We pay in Ether to use the network for running the smart contract powering the dApp. The more cars on the road, the more demand for gas, and the higher the gas price goes. But will Ethereum remain at the core of the Internet of Value, or something else take its place? Ethereum is currently the best candidate for a flippening, a word that is used to describe the point where another blockchain passes Bitcoin as the most valuable network. And significant work is underway to expand Ethereum's capability, including the Casper proof-of-stake consensus mechanism. A few platforms, though, are emerging to challenge Ethereum. There are regional networks like Neo from China or Icon from South Korea. Some protocols, like the Aeon network, were built with large-scale enterprise applications in mind. This is a huge but generally untapped market still. Two protocols getting lots of hype are Polkadot and Cosmos. They promise to unite all blockchains into a giant seamless web. By allowing different blockchains to operate with each other seamlessly, these platforms would eliminate the risk of building inside of blockchain silos, really only to operate in effect with one single vendor. Now, not every platform will succeed, but those that can solve the major challenges to blockchain implementation, like scalability and interoperability, will form the backbone of the next era of the internet. This is a video on utility tokens, the third of 7 types of crypto assets. First, a review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new supply, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Utility tokens, or app coins, are a way for a distributed application to raise funds. One of the first projects to hold a crowd sale for utility tokens was Augur. Augur is a prediction market designed to harness the wisdom of crowds in order to make markets in virtually anything. To us, Augur showed the potential power of blockchain technology. We dubbed the crowd sale, at the time, a blockchain IPO, but the stickier term was initial coin offering, or ICO. It's a bit of a misnomer, but the sale was a sign of things to come. In 2016, roughly $165 million was raised in ICOs. That was interesting, but not really enough to raise eyebrows outside of the blockchain community. But by 2017, the figure had reached at least $3 billion, perhaps as much as $7 billion. Ethereum's co-founder, Joe Lubin, believes this new fundraising model is democratizing the ability for projects to fund themselves. A distributed application like Augur can sell utility tokens, giving consumers access to services or access to scarce resources. Or a dApp can sell security tokens, which we'll cover in the next section. Augur's native token is not equity per se, but a utility token that users need in order to interact with the network or the application. Basically, Lubin says a DApp crowd sale is pre-selling something and using those proceeds to build what you need or to take a project from a rudimentary stage to a more sophisticated stage. Utility tokens can have applications in virtually every industry. Most ICOs in 2017 and 2018 were classified as utility tokens. Consider Golem, a decentralized alternative to today's centralized clouds, which are run by giants like Amazon and Apple. Golem aims to use the power of billions of devices to distribute computation, but for its model to work, it needs an incentive for us all to participate. So in 2017, Golem issued a utility token, which allows users to pay and get paid on its platform. Now, if Golem works, it could potentially disrupt cloud computing as we know it today, a massive multi-billion-dollar industry. Another example is SweetBridge. It originated the concept of a discount token. Users get a monthly discount on goods and services as long as they hold the token in a SweetBridge wallet. As more customers use the network, these tokens increase in value, or so says SweetBridge's Scott Nelson, the CEO. Customer value drives the business instead of shareholder value. Utility tokens are usually not standalone blockchains. They typically run on top of platforms like Ethereum, Icon, or EOS. The distinction between utility tokens and the underlying platform tokens can be a subtle one. After all, protocol tokens also have utility, like the Ether that's used to pay transaction fees on the Ethereum network. Filecoin, a distributed file sharing system, had its own ICO in the summer of 2017. On Filecoin, developers will be able to build any number of applications on the open network. So Filecoin is a bit of an exception. But we believe most utility tokens will run on networks like Ethereum. Up next, security tokens. Please head over to the discussion forums if you have any questions or comments. In this video, you'll learn about security tokens, the fourth of 7 types of crypto assets. Let's review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Blockchain has already upended venture capital. Wall Street could be next. The $130 billion crypto asset market is but a small fraction of the value of virtually any other major asset class. The global equity market, for instance, is around $100 trillion in size. But it turns out that the technology behind cryptocurrencies, blockchain, can work with any type of asset, making it easier to trade, store, and record ownership of basically everything. In the next 10 years, we'll see today's crypto assets lose their monopoly as securities like stocks and bonds migrate to this technology and increasingly dominate the market share. A traditional stock trade can take up to 3 days to settle and involves a handful of middlemen. With blockchain, a buyer and seller can complete the same transaction peer-to-peer on a decentralized exchange on the same day, indeed, often within seconds. So why shouldn't all these assets, stocks, bonds, dividends, futures, forwards, swaps, options, and other financial assets exist in purely digital form on blockchains? So let's consider an example: equity tokens. It's a native digital asset born on the blockchain, and we can trade it peer-to-peer without custodians, without clearinghouses, without brokers, exchanges, or banks. Fidelity, Wellington, and other giants of asset management are preparing for this brave new world. There are projects and companies building out the technology infrastructure for what could be a historic transformation, but the regulatory infrastructure still lags behind. Security tokens can help restore public trust in crypto assets. The gulf between technology and rule setting erodes public confidence in the crypto asset industry, People still aren't sure what's allowed and what isn't. And it's not clear how disputes will be settled either. Security tokens could help bridge this gap. They're really defined by what they're not. They're not cryptocurrencies or protocols or utility tokens. It's right there in the name, securities. Security token meaning digital bearer asset. Security token offerings, or so-called STOs, are the offspring in many respects of initial coin offerings, or ICOs. We believe that they'll become commonplace events in venture capital and financial services in general. This great migration of value from analog to digital is already happening. Blockchain will transform how we think about markets and middlemen. Welcome back. We have 3 more types of crypto assets still left to cover. In this video, we'll look at natural asset and commodity tokens. But first, to review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Blockchain could help solve the problem of overuse of our natural resources. Water, carbon, and air are essential for life on Earth. These natural assets are foundations also of the economy, but they've mostly been immune to market-based forces. And this has led to the exploitation of many of these resources. Society ultimately bears the costs in the form of what economists call negative externalities. Sociologist Garrett Hardin described this as the tragedy of the commons, basically a situation where a shared common resource is depleted because there's no system to govern its use or its consumption. But blockchain technology could help build a better system. Michael Casey, the co-author of The Truth Machine, wrote, "We may be moving towards a model of programmable money, capable of delivering an automated system of internal governance over common resources." That's pretty exciting. We've covered how we can tokenize technology protocols, how we can tokenize applications, and even securities into crypto assets. And the same principle can apply to physical assets in the real world. Entrepreneurs and enterprises have transferred this idea to traditional commodities with established markets like gold, oil, or natural gas. The startup Nuco, now part of the Aeon protocol, worked with the TMX Group, owner of the Toronto Stock Exchange, to show how it's feasible to copy the business logic of an oil futures contract onto the blockchain. Someone still has to take physical possession, of course, when the contract expires, but the blockchain can simplify how we clear and settle a trade in an underlying physical asset. We could also use a token backed by gold as a less volatile and more liquid medium of exchange. Indeed, the Royal Mint partnered with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to create a digital gold token, backed by actual gold in the Royal Mint's vaults. So, blockchain technology can streamline existing commodities markets, but the bigger opportunities are in areas once thought to be impossible. Natural asset tokens can be an incentive for people to cut their consumption of resources. Today's carbon trading schemes create a marketplace where companies earn credits for reducing their carbon footprint. If we can reward companies for good behavior, then why can't we reward people for doing the same thing? Now, natural resources are a hard market to penetrate because of the lack of standards and because it's a fragmented audience. Blockchain could change that by aligning incentives with a common goal, like reducing carbon emissions. Companies like CarbonX in Canada or Viridium in the United States are tackling this market by tokenizing carbon credits. Individuals who reduce their footprint can earn carbon credits redeemable for real value. How cool is that? Today, natural asset tokens are a tiny market compared with cryptocurrencies, utility tokens, and even security tokens. It's still mostly theoretical. And there are also some real challenges in the form of government policy and regulations. Blockchain alone can't hope to solve all of these issues. But there are urgent social, economic, and environmental reasons to move forward. The underlying market here is massive and untapped. It's only a matter of time before this becomes one of the largest crypto asset types. Welcome to the CryptoKitties episode of our series on crypto assets. CryptoKitties are an example of what are known as non-fungible tokens or crypto collectibles. First, a quick overview. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do three things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Crypto collectibles are a means of engaging people with blockchain technology. In December 2017, the crypto world caught CryptoKitty fever. CryptoKitties are unique, tradable virtual pets. People can buy them, raise them, and even breed them with other CryptoKitties. As of January 2018, CryptoKitties had more than 235,000 users, and it had processed $52 million in transactions running on the Ethereum network. CryptoKitties got so popular that Ethereum itself struggled to keep up, which was a sign of two things. One, popular apps have powerful network effects, and two, the underlying platform technology is still currently limited. It can't handle such popularity. At its peak, the top CryptoKitties were selling for over $100,000. It was a phenomenon. I remember at the time, a friend of mine had told me that he and his girlfriend were getting pretty serious. And I asked him, well, how serious are you getting? And he had told me, well, we're thinking of merging our CryptoKitties together. I suppose that's a modern spin on let's get a dog. Such silly and fun things are important in engaging people with breakthrough technology. So said Elon Musk. That's what he was doing, getting people's attention when he blasted his sports car into space. CryptoKitties prove this point. There are two kinds of crypto collectibles, virtual and real life. First, CryptoKitties and virtual trading cards are native digital assets without a real-life equivalent. In-game purchases of unique assets of any kind also come to mind. One online game doing this is Beyond the Void, a multiplayer online battle arena. Artists are also applying crypto economics to their virtual art. Art derives much of its value because it is scarce, but the Internet of Information lets us copy images and songs over and over, reducing the value close to zero and losing track of the original and who owns it. The blockchain connects the creative work to a unique and scarce token. In the New York Times, art reporter Scott Rayburn explored whether cryptocurrencies would be the art market's next big thing. More and more, art and other forms of expression are starting out digital. This is an exciting opportunity. Whole new categories of virtual art and collectibles could potentially explode in value. The second kind of crypto collectible represents a claim on something tangible. Eventually, 21 million Bitcoin will be in circulation, but every Rothko, Picasso, Monet, and Pollock painting is one of a kind. A company called Art3 came up with the Clio, an art-backed cryptocurrency to register real-world works of art. Others like Dada.nyc have joined the fray. Virtual art is a growing market, but the existing market is huge. Total sales in 2016 of fine art and antiques was $45 billion. This notoriously opaque market will benefit from the disinfecting sunlight of blockchain. Artwork can get a digital fingerprint through a crypto asset, allowing us to trace, track, and verify it. This is the last video on our 7 types of crypto assets. Here, we're focusing on what we call crypto fiat currencies and stablecoins. So let's review. A crypto asset is a digital asset that uses cryptography, a peer-to-peer network, and a public ledger to do 3 things: to regulate the creation of new units, to verify transactions, and to secure these transactions without any middleman. Government-backed crypto fiat currencies are feasible, but we haven't seen a trustworthy example yet. In 2017, Venezuela announced it was launching a cryptocurrency called the Petro, backed by its vast oil reserves. The cryptocurrency community reacted with astonishment and a bit of anger. This corrupt and anti-democratic government had plunged its own currency, the bolivar, into a hyperinflationary death spiral. Was it now trying to take advantage of blockchain's association with trust, security, and immutability? According to analysts, Venezuela's petro already has about 3 strikes going against it. 1, there's no evidence that the petro is actually backed by oil. 2, there's little technical information online about how it works or even which blockchain it runs on. And 3, it's controlled by the same people who tanked the bolivar. Venezuela's government moved ahead, ignoring this criticism. It raised $735 million, according to its officials. There was no other evidence to back up this claim. Soon, it was reported lawmakers in Iran and Russia were considering their own fiat cryptocurrencies. These countries, as you can see, have a few things in common. They are deeply authoritarian or deeply undemocratic, they have a lot of oil, and they are under economic sanctions. Why does this matter? Here's an obvious reason. Rogue governments could use their cryptocurrencies to undermine international law, treaties, and sanctions. This could further destabilize their already weak economies. According to the Brookings Institute, Venezuela's petro would undermine international sanctions and harm legitimate cryptocurrencies in the process. But it also shows something important. Governments can actually do this. The most promising candidates to establish a government-backed cryptocurrency are respected institutions like the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada, and the Federal Reserve, but they've made little progress or have even backtracked somewhat. They should reconsider. Crypto fiat currencies probably won't be fully decentralized and resistant to censorship like Bitcoin, but if they're implemented in the right way, they can still make markets more efficient through real-time settlement. They can improve inclusion by reducing barriers to entry. They can increase transparency into our institutions. And they can make central bank policy more effective and more responsive to events. There are interesting regional applications for digital dollars with a variety of economic benefits. Consider the example BIT is setting in the Caribbean. The company is working with the region's financial heads to create a digital dollar standard. BIT's founder, Gabriel Abed, said this is what the Caribbean needs. It's the entire world in one little melting pot, yet there is no cross-border system for payments. The goal is to enable movement of money between 2 central banks using smart contracts and digital dollars, built by BIT or others, following a digital dollar standard. There are economic and social reasons to make this happen. Abed said, remittances within the region are expensive. 40% of Caribbeans don't have access to banking. 3% fees are being taxed by foreign bankers on merchant charges using credit cards. A digital dollar standard for the region could help in all of these areas. Digital dollars have another benefit, namely price stability. Traditional currencies are generally not as volatile as Bitcoin has been historically. A crypto fiat currency could help solve this. Some crypto diehards will disagree. We still believe that Bitcoin, or something like it, will be a legitimate alternative to traditional fiat currencies. Stablecoins are emerging as a hybrid cryptocurrency. Stablecoins try to maintain the same value over time, almost always by pegging themselves to some underlying asset, like a fiat currency or gold, or by managing price through an ever-changing supply. Private entrepreneurs have been behind most of these so far. The largest one today is Tether, or USDT. Its creators say Tether is backed dollar for dollar with US dollar reserves, though analysts have questioned this claim. Others have also emerged, like MakerDAO and its stablecoin DAI, spelled D-A-I. Stablecoins could gain traction assuming 2 conditions. First, if existing cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin remain highly volatile. And second, if governments don't create their own crypto fiat currencies. So stablecoins will continue to be an interesting area of innovation. Still, there are doubts. With a stablecoin like Tether, you have to trust a single entity who now becomes the monetary authority, said BIT's Gabriel Abed. Are you better than the Federal Reserve? In the end, we do think that governments will move into this market. We believe the future reserve currencies of the world will probably be a mix of crypto fiat currencies, like a digital dollar, and decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Regional hybrids like the digital dollar standard in the Caribbean have a good chance of success too. Just don't count on the petro joining their ranks.
Can you give me some examples of where you see real potential from tokenization and the ability to create these incentives?
The easiest thing, which we've seen already, is creating a digital twin of physical assets or real-world assets on the blockchain, which have the benefits of the blockchain in having live clearance and settlement, and no back office costs to transacting these things. But then we can get a little bit more advanced, and you can start building in, and an example in that first area would just be trade finance. So you can put the asset, which is being traded, plus the money, which is being transacted in exchange for the asset. Both of those are on the blockchain and clear live. The second area is then more of these token systems where you can reward participants for doing certain actions. Let's think about it like a loyalty program on steroids. So every single time you share information or you do a behavior which the company would like, they can reward you with tokens, which can then be redeemed to do different things. There are also more sophisticated token economics out there, which people can learn about online.
So in many ways, I think crypto has been sort of the first killer app on blockchain. What's your sort of perspective on crypto these days and also looking forward?
So when I did one of my first talks, and it was like 4 or 5 years ago, the cost of participating on an exchange and converting and wasn't quite as complicated, and the cost has actually gotten almost as high as using traditional fiat money converters. But in the early days, there was a statistics from the Gates Foundation that talked about how many migrant workers were sending money back to developing countries. I don't know if it was like 3 or 4 times what world aid sends to these developing countries, and it has a huge effect on the education and healthcare of the individuals in these countries, right? And so the idea was that if you could facilitate and drop that cost, it would contribute billions to that, right? And so the Gates Foundation published some numbers around billions of dollars that would be saved if you could decrease that spread that those particular people specifically were paying. But I think what's happened is that it's put a lot of pressure on the traditional exchanges in order to decrease that cost, because all of a sudden people are like, "Whoa, look at these numbers! This is absurd, right?" But I think that what's interesting about crypto is that it was the lubricant that helped all this hyper innovation take place. And what's interesting is that all this cross-pollination, and people would have one successful project and then invest in another project and start another project. And so it's really enabled this hyper innovation to take place and the sharing of ideas around the world. And if you look back at the early days of the internet, people always talk about pets.com and how Bezos was one of the biggest investors in that, and so how some of this roadkill actually ended up being great fertilizer and educational aids to the later models that evolved. And I think that what's happened over the course of the last 2 years has been huge. It's really facilitated a lot of sharing and learning. And I mean, in those days you didn't have GitHub, but now people are sharing all kinds of information. They're on Telegram. And so outside of all the regulatory concerns about it, I think that the amount of innovation and excitement about technologies and data and visibility and transactions has been huge. And I think that there are a lot of new business models that will be facilitated as a result of all this hyper innovation that's taken place. So,
at the Blockchain Research Institute All Members Summit in New York City back in June of 2018, one of our members stood up and posed a provocative question. He said, "Is the digital wallet the equivalent of the browser? the wallet for the Internet of Value and the browser for the Internet of Information. And I thought it was such a great question that we decided to launch a custom research project, and I decided to tackle it myself. And I set out to research the role of the digital wallet as a critical tool to store assets, digital assets of all time. And this project is a foundational piece for the BRI members because digital wallet technology is critical to the widespread adoption and use of blockchain and blockchain infrastructure. The timing for this project couldn't be better. In October of 2020, PayPal, the large online payments platform, announced its new service for using cryptocurrencies at some 26 million merchants worldwide. But PayPal's version of the digital wallet is really more a payments interface. It's not a wallet that holds assets, things of value, beyond financial account data. And we need digital wallets to do what physical wallets have done for the last 100 years. So what are those? One is to actually hold money for making payments. Two is to hold identity cards for proving our identities. And three is to hold access to our data, usually in the form of a document like a receipt or a ticket or other data. And if you use or invest in different cryptocurrencies, which is the main form of digital assets today, you have to hold them somewhere. And ultimately, all assets, not just cryptocurrencies, will become digital assets. So that somewhere tends to be a digital wallet of some kind. So in this research project, I studied innovation in the digital wallet space. And there are 4 parts to this research. In part 1, I sum up our 3 basic uses of wallets: making payments, providing identity, and accessing data. I then show where the digital wallet software fits in the technology stack as an application. And I wrap up the first part by defining my vision for a universal digital wallet. In part 2, I lay out a wallet taxonomy for individual and organizational use. And using that taxonomy, I size up how our current set of digital wallets are supporting payments, identities, and data storage. And honestly, the results are mixed today. Current digital wallet technology is good for payments with fiat currency, adequate for payments with cryptocurrency, and passable for selected documents like e-tickets. It's not quite ready for digital ID, let alone storing and accessing personal data streams, ultimately leading to the holy grail of a self-sovereign digital identity. And no product yet approaches the vision of a universal digital wallet to support all 3 use cases. Now, in part 3 of the project, I compare the development and adoption of digital wallet technology to that of the web browser. And there are some interesting parallels. I sketch out 3 futures with digital wallets for individuals, organizations, and devices on the Internet of Things. And with digital wallets of their own, things will be able to buy, sell, negotiate without human intervention. The billions and trillions of inert objects in our world will not just be communicating, they'll be executing transactions. Your solar panels will be able to sell excess energy to your neighbor's house or onto the grid, or your electric car will rent itself out to a neighbor who needs a lift. So I also look at the implementation challenges of doing this, and there are 4 big ones. One is market fragmentation rather than consolidation, as in the browser wars. You remember that the first browser was Mosaic, and then the first commercially available browser was Netscape, but there were some others. And ultimately, we have a very small handful today. The second one is the user interface and user experience, both that are real challenges right now. And the third is security. And we know what to do if our physical wallet is stolen. We report it to the police. But what if we do What do we do if our digital wallet is hacked? Last challenge is the lack of standards, protocols, and technical oversight in this space. Non-trivial challenges, to be sure. Industry groups have formed around payments, not-profit groups have formed around identity, and still other groups have formed around the storage and access of personal data and documents of value. But no group is taking a wider view at this point. Now, in part 4 of the report, I make some practical suggestions for executives and entrepreneurs at this stage of wallet development. Digital wallets will create new markets. They'll challenge existing business models. And they'll really tempt hackers, for sure, too. And every function of the digital wallet will likely involve blockchain technologies for security and record keeping. Finding a path forward will take a collaborative approach. So all of us stakeholders in this technology will need to be involved. We're going to have to work together to create the industry standards for payments, identity, data ownership, and governance of all three of these application areas. So we hope this research gives you greater confidence in the progress and practicality, not just of wallet technology, but of blockchain thus far. These three use cases, payments, identity, and personal data, are each compelling in their own right. And together they're not only transformational, they're very fundamental to the notion of civilization, where we can be secure, we can have autonomy of the person, and where we can get our digital data under our own control so that we can manage it responsibly for ourselves. The winning digital wallets will be those that support all three of these, as the internet browser supports a whole variety of functions. And the winners will be easy to use because of a fabulous user interface, but they'll also need to be difficult to hack. And users will need to have some kind of recourse if their wallets are lost or stolen. These are all opportunities for BRI members, and I hope very much that they'll enjoy reading this document and acting on it as I enjoyed putting it together.
Welcome back. It's time to talk about initial coin offerings, or ICOs. To some, they've been a cause for celebration, to others, a topic of debate, and to most, a target of regulators. Now, we think the term ICO is a bit of a misnomer. These aren't necessarily coins in the sense of them being cryptocurrencies, but rather digital assets that can represent many things, such as ownership in a company, access to a network, carbon credits, or even art. A better term would be token generation events, but because ICOs is commonplace, we'll stick with that term for now. Initial coin offerings are fundamentally changing how companies, investors, and users come together. So how did this all begin? Well, the week of August 17th, 2015 was an ugly one in the markets. The Chinese stock market crashed, the S&P 500 had its worst performance in 4 years, financial pundits everywhere were talking about a possible global economic crisis. IPOs were being pulled and mergers stalled. Silicon Valley was even getting antsy. Were those $1 billion plus private companies really worth such inflated values? Despite all of these negatives, a project called Augur launched one of the most successful crowdfunding campaigns ever that week. In that first week, more than 3,500 people from the United States, Asia, Europe, South America, and Africa contributed a total of $4 million to the project. There was no brokerage, no investment bank, no stock exchange, no mandatory filings, no regulator, and no lawyers, not even a Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Welcome to the first ICO, or initial coin offering. Matching investors with entrepreneurs is a key function of the financial services industry. The process of raising equity capital through private placements, initial public offerings, secondary offerings, and private investments in public equities, or so-called PIPEs, hasn't really changed much since the 1930s. New crowdfunding platforms are certainly helping entrepreneurs access capital using the internet. The Oculus Rift and the Pebble Watch were two early successes based on this model. They raised funds, but the participants didn't actually gain any upside. Today, the US Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act, or JOBS Act, allows small investors to make direct investments through crowdfunding. A middleman, like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, remains a part of the picture. So does the usual payment methods like credit card and PayPal. The ICO goes one step further. Now companies can raise funds on the blockchain by issuing tokens or crypto securities. These can represent equity in the company or even bonds. In Auger's case, the tokens granted market maker seats on the platform, which basically means that token owners get to decide which prediction markets the company will open. The average investment in Auger was only $750, but imagine minimum subscriptions of as low as $1 or even 10 cents. Anyone in the world, even the poorest and most remote people, could become a venture capital investor. ICOs are paving the way for a new type of distributed virtual exchange. An even bigger success than Auger was Ethereum. It funded the development of a whole new blockchain through a crowd sale of its own named Ether. In 2014, when Ethereum raised around $20 million, it was the largest crowdfunding initiative ever. What has happened since, though, has been really nothing short of remarkable. Since people began keeping track, the amount of money raised via ICO, or what we call token generation events, has grown into the billions of dollars. Some of these new protocols, projects, and companies could be the next Google or the next Amazon. Likely, most will fail. Could we be on the frontier of the halcyon days of entrepreneurship? Or will investors sour on ICOs after bad experiences with failed projects? There are reasons to be optimistic that the creation of this new funding model will mean entrepreneurs anywhere can raise funds and support the growth of a new business. Please go to the discussion forum if you have any questions. For more on ICOs, check out Chapter 3 of Blockchain Revolution under the topic of blockchain IPOs.
From your time as an investor, what was your experience with initial coin offerings, and what did you learn from that?
Fascinating experience. I think I had never seen ever before so many ideas getting funded. And by ideas, I really mean nothing more than a number of words and websites, sometimes a PDF on that website getting funded. And again, it ties in with the idea that these are stories getting funded. There was nothing substantial under it. Sometimes these stories literally didn't have a list of who the founders were, who was working on it, because it was meant to be some blockchain that was supposed to be anonymous or provide some kind of anonymous services. And so, of course, the founders had to remain anonymous to be to match with this idea of anonymity. So the idea of storytelling was something that was very, very strong for ICOs. I think another thing that I learned over time is that we've moved away from ICOs being successful because of mere storytelling, and we've moved more towards two other elements that really tend to define how these ICOs or tokens are being valued. And these two other elements are, on one hand, data on actual blockchains, which is the equivalent of what I think a Warren Buffett would call fundamental analysis. So it's not based on cash flows, but it's based on things like token velocity. How many tokens on a given day actually are being transferred between users in the system. There's different properties about the concentration of stakeholders who actually transfer different kinds of coins. Is it just 1% or is it 50%? And you can actually gauge the health of a business by looking almost at any given time, downloading the entire blockchain, and then measuring different measures that are similar to cash flow about actual tokens on these blockchains. So this is sort of a kind of a science and a kind of a series of metrics that we haven't developed, but that is emerging slowly in the space. And then we have the traditional analysis that's based fully on technical analysis. So price action in the financial markets, you take prices, you take volumes, and then you extract something out of that. ICOs are kind of an amalgamation of these three camps: storytelling, blockchain data, and financial data. And I think that we're seeing essentially an evolution away from storytelling today towards more technical, and in the long term will probably be the fundamental blockchain data that's going to define the value of these ICOs.
In this module, we looked at what is essentially a new asset class, and we walked through 7 types of these assets. First, we looked at cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, the granddaddy of all crypto assets, blockchain's first killer app. Others like Dash, Monero, and Zcash look to do what Bitcoin does, but better. Second, were platform tokens like Ether of the Ethereum blockchain. These are designed to support decentralized applications. Ethereum and others will form the backbone of the next era of the internet. Third were utility tokens like Golem. These are programmable blockchain assets that have utility in an application. With Golem, think Amazon Web Services without Amazon. Fourth were security tokens, native digital bonds, equities, and other securities trading peer-to-peer. Canadian startup Polymath is making strides in this category, as are others. Fifth, we looked at natural asset tokens. These represent something tangible, like gold, traded peer-to-peer with real-time settlement. Think of the Royal Mint Gold, a token backed by gold bullion in the Royal Mint's vaults. Sixth were crypto collectibles, like CryptoKitties, an entirely unique digital asset. Last were crypto fiat currencies and stablecoins, crypto fiat currencies issued and governed by central banks. Venezuela launched the Petro, a cryptocurrency backed by the country's oil reserves. This class of assets is limited only by our imagination and by financial regulations. Right now, the regulations governing these assets are still unclear. They're also inconsistent across different jurisdictions. We'll look more at these concerns in one of our other courses. Meanwhile, I encourage you to research these crypto assets wherever you live and share what you learn on the discussion forum. On behalf of my co-author, Don Tapscott, and our academic partner, INSEAD, thank you for joining us.
Welcome back. This is a really important module on a really important topic, smart contracts. This topic is so important, we added a new section on it in our new paperback edition of the book, Blockchain Revolution. Smart contracts are the brainchild of Nick Szabo. He's a computer scientist, a legal scholar, a cryptographer. And he came up with the idea of smart contracts back in the early 1990s. If you think about it, before the launch of Amazon.com, Google, or well before Facebook. But the technology didn't exist back then to run smart contracts over the internet. Also, in the 1990s, Nick came up with the idea of digital gold, as he called it. Google the phrase bit gold, 2 words, bit gold, and you'll find it. So he's considered one of blockchain's pioneers for this foundational work. And you'll learn all about it in this module. You'll learn what smart contracts are and how they work. We'll look at how blockchain-based smart contracts help to do 3 things. First, they reduce transaction costs by eliminating the need for intermediaries. 2, they improve the security and the privacy of the parties involved. And 3, they help to enforce the terms of an agreement. Smart contracts are essential to the blockchain revolution, and we'll compare them to traditional contracts. We'll look at them in the context of traditional legal systems and contract law. Finally, we'll look at some use cases, smart contract strategies, and best practices for developing and deploying them. If you have any questions about this module, please click over to the discussion forum and post them there. In this video, we'll define smart contracts and why they're so important to the blockchain revolution. Contracts are part of the basic building blocks of our identity, our global economy, and for that matter, society at large. Contracts set mutually agreeable rules, the terms of conditions for assets, and performance incentives in the form of rewards and penalties. Chances are you've entered into either a verbal or a written agreement with someone at some point in your life, probably recently. Even something as simple as buying something at a store and getting a receipt as proof of purchase can be considered a contractual agreement. You pay the money, the seller gives you the product, deal done. So what exactly makes a contract smart? How does it differ from the ones that we already use in day-to-day business life? Well, a smart contract is a new concept in both law and in finance. It's software coded to mimic the logic of an agreement. It has a unique method of ensuring compliance, namely, it can automate performance. Now, how does it do that? Well, a smart contract can call on algorithms and sensors to decide whether the agreed upon conditions have been met. Programmed into it is a specific control structure. This structure lets you predict the contract's outcome at any point in time. What's key is the contract can't be seized or stopped or redirected to a different blockchain address once it's set in motion on a blockchain. No central authority or third party can revoke it. No one can override the consensus of the blockchain network. All you have to do is transmit the signed transaction to any of the blockchain network nodes. And this can happen from anywhere using pretty much any medium. Let's say someone shut down the internet or a government agency tried to stifle communication. You could still conduct the transaction, whether over satellite or shortwave radio or with Morse code. All you need is someone on the other end to decode the deal and record it in the blockchain. It's provable with mathematical certainty. Nick Szabo, the father of smart contracts, compares it to an old-fashioned vending machine. The simple nature of the business relationship is already programmed into the machine. Let's say the machine is selling certain beverages at certain prices. The buyer selects the beverage, inserts enough coins to cover the price. The machine then verifies the amount, dispenses the chosen beverage, and makes change if necessary. Smart contract. Today, there are nearly 7 million vending machines in the United States alone. We're already surrounded by these smart contracts. So why use larger scale and more complicated smart contracts? What are the benefits? Well, there are three. The first benefit is reducing mental transaction costs. This means the computer does more precisely and more aptly what the human mind cannot or prefers not to solve. Consider Uber's price algorithm. It estimates the cost of driving a given route and computes a take it or leave it price. Therefore, neither the driver nor the rider needs to waste time haggling over a few extra dollars. The service would have never taken off if Uber drivers or passengers had to do the math behind every price. We could probably continue relying on taxi rates and meters. The second benefit is increased predictability. Smart contracts are mathematical. They're enacted by machines distributed across a blockchain network. This enables us to measure loss and manage risk more accurately. This is especially useful in financial or legal areas where uncertainties can be high. The third main benefit is broad security. We need to think about the security of all aspects and functions of our business relationships. Traditional contracts tend to leave security holes and are disconnected from actual control over assets. Smart contracts directly control those assets, and they can provide far-ranging security in our business dealings. Now that you've learned about the benefits of smart contracts, you may wonder if they're legally binding. There's no final answer yet. Under U.S. common law, parties can express or imply an agreement. They needn't draft nor sign a paper contract for the terms to be legally binding. Legal scholars Primavera de Filippi and Aaron Wright believe smart contracts honoring legal agreements are likely enforceable under U.S. law. Intent will be expressed through code rather than through paper. If the obligations are recurring, then smart contracts could even serve as protocols of performance. Only time and courts around the world will tell.
There's a lot of talk about smart contracts. What's your view on that? How smart are they?
Not smart at all. In fact, they're probably some of the dumbest contracts out there. The beauty of smart contracts is that they're a set of if-then statements. So even though smart contracts are enveloped in code, for people who don't code or who don't program, the way to understand it is a bunch of if-then statements. If this happens, then that happens. We think that these things are going to save us from world hunger and black holes, but in fact, all that they really do is they allow us to encode very simple ideas in code. When we try to encode very complex ideas in code, that typically doesn't go well. The big example is the DAO, which was an organization coded in a set of smart contracts on the Ethereum blockchain that raised $150 million in August 2016. It was supposed to be this autonomous venture capitalist investing in other tokens, which is kind of a mind-boggling idea. And what happened is that after this DAO gathered $150 million, there was a hacker who looked at the code, figured out a weakness in these smart contracts, and started draining $50 million out of the $150 million. So smart contracts aren't really that smart. They're typically pretty dumb, and most importantly, they're incomplete. So what we need to understand is how to leverage incomplete contracts in a way that is smart, not necessarily to think that the contracts themselves are smart.
In this video, we'll look at the effect of smart contracts on the 4 phases of the deal cycle. Those are search, negotiation, performance, and post-performance incentives. Most of the world's historic economic revolutions began by improving one or more of these deal cycle phases. They introduced new ways of human interaction. They reduced the risk of broken trust. They increased the quality or the quantity of information flow, whether it be through prices or language. Blockchain-based smart contracts may spark the next economic revolution by transforming these phases yet again. We'll explore each phase and the new high-tech capabilities in more detail. So let's begin with the search phase, the phase when buyers and sellers find and size up each other. The first era of the internet was great for search. New web browsers and search engines allowed people to connect and to find each other all around the world. Text searches on Amazon or eBay help consumers to find products. Buying key advertising words through Google helped companies to find their target market. The global positioning system of maps used by Lyft and Uber help in matching their drivers to potential riders through smartphones. These once radical gains in innovation have now become pretty standard to the search phase. The negotiation phase is the process of agreeing upon and committing to deal terms. Computers and the internet have made ample innovations in this phase too. Consider eBay's collectibles auctions, Google's keyword auctions, and various price setting or price discovery algorithms. Pricing algorithms are already especially valuable for situations involving variable costs but requiring take it or leave it prices. Once again, we use Uber as a prime example. Its algorithm factors in distance, driving conditions, and other transportation data to set a price. More precise data equals fairer pricing, and fairer pricing means less mistrust between parties. The performance phase ends when the terms of the contract have been performed. Ensuring performance involves managing collateral. Collateral can be money, a guarantee, or a product. In the first era of the internet, few innovations have occurred in this phase. Compared to past decades, automation has increased proof of performance with advancements in computers, sensors, and blockchain technology. But the pace of this progress pales in comparison to the gains made in the search and negotiation phases. In this phase, the smart contract manages the collateral. It can hold it in escrow and either free it or seize it to effect an outcome. That barely scratches the surface of smart contracts' capability in this performance phase. Last is the post-performance incentive phase used to ensure the desired outcome. These include chargeback ability, ratings, and contract law. Credit card chargeback gives the consumer or the distributor protection in the case of fraud or a conflict in performance. If there's an issue with the outcome, the consumer can ask the bank to claw back the money from the merchant's account and refund it to the consumer's account. An investigation may ensue if the bank or other authority validates a request for investigation. It's a widespread method to assess post-performance. Ratings also serve as incentive in the post-performance phase. Public feedback, like a business rating or a consumer credit rating, can accrue to our reputations and influence the search and negotiation phases. If we want a good rating, then we perform up to par. When we don't perform well, then parties may select someone else next time. It's a useful system for finding the right match and promoting quality. Legal recourse is also an option, but it's costly and not always effective. The point of smart contracts is to reduce reliance on litigation. In total, trillions of dollars have been moved through the internet, improving how we form contracts and perform under those contracts with each other. We now have far fewer problems finding what we want if it exists. Yet most of the problems of negotiation, performance, and post-performance remain. So businesses still face higher costs and bottlenecks in the post-performance phase for even the simplest and most straightforward types of credit and payment. Smart contracts running on public blockchains could provide tremendous innovation in business. How? Well, by applying this technology to all four phases. Smart contracts have improved in security, integrity, and they enable globally seamless reach. And we need to support more kinds of deals between increasingly far-flung and differently lawed and cultured people, and deals between devices on the Internet of Things as well. Cryptocurrencies, tokens, blockchain-based smart contracts can create value by permitting continual money storage and transfer in the performance phase. Second layer or peripheral networks like Lightning will help us use these currency and settlement systems for payments at a larger scale too. For more detail about smart contracts and phases of the deal cycle, check out Nick Szabo's white paper, Winning Strategies for Smart Contracts. He did that as part of our work in the Blockchain Research Institute. And if you have any questions about the ideas we discussed, please visit the discussion forum. In this video, we'll explore the differences between smart contracts and traditional contracts, and we'll look at their place in our quickly evolving digital world. To understand the central differences, we need to define these contracts' capabilities. Logic in traditional law stems from the minds of people and their analogies. Traditional contracts take the form of human language, interpreted mainly by lawyers. It's very flexible, even corruptible. It involves human judgment. It lives in jurisdictional silos. It's very local, and it's very nationalistic. Nick Szabo, the father of smart contracts, calls this traditional contract language wet code. Traditional law is highly evolved. In old case law, lawyers can find many important conditions that computer programmers haven't yet contemplated, or, like the death of a user, aren't easy to see on a computer. On the flip side, software relies on bits, data, and Boolean logic. It's rigid and it's predictable. It runs the same on every computer, on the network, anywhere in the world. And smart contracts contain rules and conditions analyzed by software code. Along with the code, performance is verified and executed by impartial technology, such as sensor-guided effectors. We call this kind of contract language dry code. The main task of software engineering, as well as contract drafting, is to anticipate the behavior of parties and related events in their performance. The more anticipated cases, the more conditions in the contract. In dry code, each condition increases the complexity and attack surface of the code. Attack surface refers to the number of points in a software program where an attacker could break in or take over any assets controlled by the program. If the program is a smart contract, the assets could be your digital identity, all your private data, or your crypto assets. Important stuff. More conditions usually increase the contract's reliance on potentially imperfect or external data, like a temperature reading to manage more of performance. On the other hand, when a smart contract handles fewer conditions, there are usually more conditions a human mediator or the traditional legal system has to handle. And those can add to the costs and risks of a deal. After all, lawyers initiating lawsuits are, how shall I put this, expensive. So, which is more reliable, a traditional contract or a smart contract? Well, actually, they aren't quite complementary. Dry code can yield harsh results if the coder has overlooked the scenario. It would take some rewind capability and what's called multiple signature authority, or multi-sig for short, for the two unhappy parties to reverse the outcome. Otherwise, the results may be hard to undo without traditional legal intervention. Traditional contracts tend to be biased towards their jurisdiction of origin. Blockchains, on the other hand, apply the same rules everywhere in the globe. Working together, wet code and dry code can secure the foundation for strong business relationships. Lawyers don't need to worry about robots taking their jobs. Their work complements the work of machines running smart contracts. Smart contracts are part of the digital evolution of deal-making and contract law. They make possible what was once impossible. And that's why lawyers and software engineers need to break out of their silos and work together. Lawyers can learn the basics of coding, and engineers can learn the basics of contract language. They can together run deal scenarios and then work out the terms and conditions of the deal together. Up next, we look more closely at the relationship between smart contracts and traditional legal systems. In this video, we'll explore the relationship between smart contracts and traditional legal systems. If we're talking to a lawyer, the most accurate way to describe a smart contract is as a set of security protocols taking on the burden of lawsuit. You know what a repo man is? Repo is short for repossession. Banks and finance companies hire repo men to repossess cars and other assets when whoever bought the asset on credit defaults on a loan. Usually they just stop making payments. So let's imagine a repo man comes and takes your car. Now the burden of a lawsuit shifts from the creditor, your bank, over to you, the debtor. Going to court to enforce or dispute a purchase contract is expensive and someone has to bear the cost. A repo man places the burden on the person with the largest obligation. The responsibility usually rests on the party most likely to breach. By removing the burden of lawsuit from the creditor, lenders will have a lower cost of lending. That means they'll be able to offer lower rates and provide more loans. A smart contract, like a repo man, adds a layer of security. This layer can match the rights and requirements expected from a relationship with concrete action. Running on a public blockchain, smart contracts can control assets jointly with authorized addresses, namely public key pairs controlled by users. If, as they say, possession is 9/10 of the law, then a cross-border blockchain-based financial smart contract may be 99% of the law. In other words, smart contracts may reduce the need to seek remedy with traditional law. But the question still remains, will smart contracts hold up in court? A smart contract generally makes no attempt to be legally binding. It's called a smart contract because it mimics or improves upon the effects of a traditional legal contract. It provides incentives for performance, not by threatening litigation, but by using software to control money and other assets. If the smart contract can't take into account all probable factors and the risk of a lawsuit, then a traditional contract may also be needed. In such cases, it's risky to expect the parties, lawyers, judges, and jurors to interpret the dry code. That is, to decipher the lines of software code. They'll need to look at the wet code, like the user interface and the traditional legal text that lawyers use. We may need to supplement our dry code with wet code, evolved from lawyers of the jurisdiction. The cost will be high, but then again, so is the risk without it. This begs another question. How much of a traditional contract do we still need, and what are the costs of enforcing it? On one hand, smart contracts make some cross-border relationships between small businesses and individuals possible by reducing the reliance on complex and outdated methods. On the flip side, what if the execution of the smart contract penalizes one party too harshly? Most likely, it'll take the traditional system to fix the problem, and that could be costly. We stated earlier in this module that wet code and dry code are complementary, so we may want to supplement traditional contracts with smart contracts. Both parties have the option to roll back undesired, unexpected outcomes. Although smart contracts and traditional contracts work best in tandem, there are some smart contract programming options available to deal with contract breaches. One is performance verification code. It detects a failure in execution, and it will seize the on-chain collateral of whoever breached the contract as payment for damages. If the outcome is unsatisfactory for both parties, then they can rewind some of their transactions through the multi-sig rewind we discussed in a prior session. The parties unanimously agree to undo a payment or pay compensation with a separate additional money transfer. The really tricky part comes with the matter of jurisdiction. Smart contracts are not regulatory technology, also known as reg tech. Smart contracts are global and persist on a globally distributed blockchain. They're specific to the dry code as programmed by their original coders. They control assets and verify performance obligations. So they manage the burden of lawsuit. RegTech is about checking whether human beings are complying with laws and regulations in certain areas. RegTech is only a simulation of how wet code may be enforced by a court. To wrap up, we ask this final question. What if all our computers could check our contracts to see whether they're compliant? That's essentially what RegTech attempts to do. Some people have called these compliance checkers smart contracts, but that's not accurate. Smart contracts deal with assets. They don't have knowledge of all of the world's legal systems. RegTech focuses on the application of wet code. These two forms of technology are clearly different at this stage in the evolution of blockchain technology. If you've got questions or comments about these ideas, please post them on the discussion forum. Up next, we explore the various application areas of smart contracts.
You hear a lot of people talking about smart contracts. What's your view on that? How smart are they? What's the potential there?
How smart are smart contracts? Good question. Our lawyers have a good quip, which is code is not law. Law is law. And if we need to abide to the law, we need to make sure that our code can too, right? So one of the innovative things about a smart contract is you are programming business logic. I don't think that when we program business logic, we need to contain the legal logic. But one thing which is really interesting that open law, for example, is doing is they are taking physical legal agreements and then putting those on the blockchain, rather than the other way around, saying code is law and cannot be dictated by the law of the land, saying we'll take the law of the land and program that into our business protocols and applications. And then those applications abide by the law.
In this video, we'll look at 5 possible applications of smart contracts and how they could improve various areas of industry. The first application is retail payments. The implementation of blockchain-based smart contracts may be just around the corner. Think of smart money or smart payments. How would that work? Well, we asked our collaborator, Michael Casey, to describe smart money. And he used an example of you sending your kid off to university and you give them some money and hope they spend it on tuition and books and not in the bar. Well, when your son goes into the bar and tries to buy a mojito, the money says, sorry, I don't do mojitos. I only do tuition and books. That's smart money. And smart payments could revolutionize the whole payment system. But using them on a public blockchain poses a challenge at the moment. Public blockchains can't yet scale to very large volumes, at least not without taking up massive amounts of network bandwidth. Because of this, full nodes could fail to provide security and compromise the network. Second layer or peripheral systems like Lightning for Bitcoin or Sprite or Raiden for Ethereum could solve this problem. These run in smart contract fashion by posting collateral on the public blockchain. The collateral ensures a long series of off-chain transactions will finally reach settlement on-chain without using excess energy. The second application is worry-minimized commerce. Consumers want simplicity, and that starts with the deal funnel. Our prospective customers enter the funnel when they find us. They come out the other end as full-fledged customers when both of us have performed our parts of the deal. In between those points, the deal funnel narrows, and for whatever reason, we tend to lose most prospects as they move through the process. The key is to lower the index of worry for customers. Worry-free commerce is like using a vending machine. You stick the money into the machine, your soda comes out, transactions complete, bada bada bing. You don't want to keep adding money, hoping some amount will finally get you to a soda. Likewise, consumers in other industries don't want the hassle of repeated actions and added charges. Sacrificing their limited time or their private information is not always worth the product or service to be received. One way to change this is by shortening the forms that customers must fill out. Credit card forms have the highest abandonment rate. Cautionary tales about data breaches and identity theft are ongoing. The fewer lines on the form, the less exposed or at-risk customers feel. There's also the fear of overcharges for services with no set value. If we can reduce customers' worries about cutting forms and recurring charges, then the drop-off rate should decrease. How do we do this? Well, first, we get rid of advertisements in those payment windows for filling out and saving credit card information in some centralized database. That includes the databases of payment processors like PayPal, Square, and Spotify. Then we implement a blockchain-based payment system. This system never asks customers to enter confidential information and never stores such information. We're talking about a second layer retail blockchain solution. Such a solution could greatly reduce these consumer worries. They could shorten their process and at the same time have their privacy protected. The third application of smart contracts is in insurance with parametric contracts. A parametric contract pays out based on measurable data, not on some estimate of the loss. This means it assesses the actual loss in revenue following an insured event. Specifically, it uses an input oracle tested for yielding quality data. And this oracle monitors the insured party's books for actual revenue losses. Parametric contracts are far more open to smart contract automation. They need fewer manual steps, if any at all. Traditional insurance depends on claims adjustment, usually based on subjective or qualitative data. The fourth application is logistics. Smart contracts could improve logistics systems across a supply chain, especially across boundaries where parties may not know or not trust each other. They could optimize supply chain logistics, from the machines making the parts to the parts themselves, track from the factory floor to their final usage. This is possible through the combination of communication networks, the global positioning system, scanning and sensor technology, and the Internet of Things. Participants could track assets by their barcodes as they pass through physical checkpoints like ports or warehouses. Smart contracts would identify performance as the assets move through time and space. They'd trigger devices like sensors to hash data on their whereabouts onto a shared blockchain. We could speed up the metabolism of supply chains, and we could improve inventory management, transportation, distribution, accounting, payment processes, and more across entire deal cycles. Think about the Uber ride matching app. It subjects millions of riders and drivers to algorithmic control. Drivers choose when to work and have only 10 to 20 seconds to respond to a trip request. They don't learn the customer's destination until pickup. If drivers miss 3 trip requests in a row, they're logged out automatically for 2 minutes. Uber sends drivers a weekly report, and the report includes confirmation rates and average customer rating. If the ratings get too low, Uber can fire the driver as an independent contractor. But with blockchain technology and smart contracts, drivers may not need Uber to reach riders. They may be able to use smart contract templates for ride sharing running on public blockchains. Even a big disruptor like Uber could be disrupted. The fifth and final application is algorithmic management. If you've ever obeyed a traffic light, I hope you have, then you've been managed by an algorithm. Computers decide when the lights change based on sensors in the pavement, monitoring traffic flow, and so on. Algorithms decide when we must stop and when we may go. Most of us do as we're signaled to do to avoid an accident or a traffic fine. In employment situations where performance can be measured, computers can keep track of far more people than human bosses can, and with greater detail and, well, perfect memory. Consider how Uber uses data to rate its drivers. We could use this method for the delivery of goods and the offloading or onloading of assets at warehouses. We think of algorithmic management as involving employees, but these capabilities could also foster new relationships, the ability to specify a task and verify its performance. This may lead to more hiring of independent contractors, for example, less hiring of employees on a payroll. So to wrap up, if you're looking to remove bottlenecks and increase efficiency, then smart contracts are worth a closer look.
So much about supply chains is about a promise that exists inside that supply chain. Did I get what I wanted? Did I get it when I needed it in order to keep my business moving? And so smart contracts have a lot of potential to be that guarantee or be that promise that customers and suppliers really expect. When you think about any time something moves between a supplier and ultimately their customer, there's an implicit contract in place about that movement. And so we think that blockchains can activate that interaction in a much more efficient way than having intermediaries involved in third-party kinds of things. So we believe that that those guarantees or those promises that exist inside of supply chains can be very effectively dealt with in smart contracts on a blockchain.
Previously, we've reviewed some applications of smart contracts. Now we'll walk you through what Nick Szabo recommended to managers in his white paper on smart contracts that he did for us at the Blockchain Research Institute. Here's our take on 5 of his suggestions for deciding whether blockchains and smart contracts can help you in business. First, audit your organization's business processes for measurable changes. Look for conditions of performance you could verify by sensors or computers. These could include payments, financial arrangements, logistics, checkpoints, and tasks involving time and distance. You could use smart contracts with oracles in these cases. Second, if you're coordinating activities across borders, consider using public blockchains rather than private ones. The security of public blockchains depends on computer science rather than on local law enforcement. That makes them more reliable and less susceptible to human interference or worse, corruption. Mature public blockchains are securely permissionless and seamlessly global. Those qualities make them more secure and reliable under a whole variety of conditions, be they local, regional, or international. They also help you expand your global reach. Third, if you'd like to reduce your need for intermediaries for verifying identity or adapting to local laws, then smart contracts could help. Make your business processes less like a bureaucracy, both internal and outward facing. Make them more like a vending machine. That means few to no forms to fill out, more metrics to call on and respond to. You'll not impose the risk of identity theft on your stakeholders, as lots of other organizations impose on theirs. You'll also reduce your legal risks. You may even increase your reputation as a stress-free, worry-free party to do business with. Fourth, consider hiring lawyers who know computer science and software engineers who know law. Ask them to collaborate on codifying the basics of your business relationships. It's important for your lawyers and software engineers to know the strengths and weaknesses of each other's approach. Software engineers will benefit from knowing the history of contract law and practice. Fifth, if you'd like to shrink payroll and increase your business flexibility, then consider converting some or all of your employment contracts into independent contractor or business outsourcing contracts. If you can verify performance of certain employee tasks with measurement rather than human judgment, then this could work for you. It allows you to outsource more tasks as you need them completed. Measuring performance stresses best practices. It also opens up competitive bidding for those tasks. This is especially useful across national borders. Businesses hire employees when contracts can't possibly cover all the tasks that they may need to do or perform. Instead, they assign tasks on the fly, so whoever on staff is available and qualified gets to do it. Once you can codify and measure an employee task, you can restructure your contractual relationship with the person completing it. Those are 5 of 10 suggestions that Nick made in his white paper, and we encourage you to read the rest and how they might apply to your own business. Congratulations on completing this module. This is one of the most challenging modules of the course, and we've covered a lot of ground in a very short time. So let's review. You've learned what a smart contract is and how it can control and secure assets in business dealings. You've learned the 4 phases of the deal cycle: search, negotiation, performance, and post-performance incentives. You've looked at ways to increase the value and flow of deals using smart contracts on a blockchain. You've learned the differences between smart contracts and traditional contracts. We've talked about them in terms of dry code and wet code. And we've argued that they're complementary in nature. You've learned about the relationship of smart contracts to traditional legal systems. Smart contracts may be legally enforced to lessen the burden of litigation. You've learned 5 applications of smart contracts. Those were in retail payments, commercial deals, insurance, supply chain logistics, and management. They verify performance and remove bottlenecks in processes. And last but not least, we've given you 5 suggestions for seeing what smart contracts could do for you. Start by auditing your business processes. Smart contracts could take the place of some intermediaries and help you design a more flexible and responsive workforce for your needs. For more detail, please review Nick Szabo's excellent white paper on smart contracts. He did invent the idea, after all. Also see the section on smart contracts in the new preface to the paperback edition of Blockchain Revolution. If you have questions or comments about the module, please click over to the discussion forum. And on behalf of my collaborator, Alex Tapscott, and our academic partner, INSEAD, thanks for joining us. In this module, we look at the potential of blockchain in managing identity. By the end of this week, you'll be able to describe 5 problems with our current identifier-based systems. One is the need for some overarching proof of personhood, like a birth certificate. Another is all the data we generate, but other parties own. Whenever we access the large centralized systems we use for email, banking, health insurance, and so on, we need to identify ourselves. These identifiers can be government-issued ID cards, self-selected passwords, or biometric data, like a thumbprint. These identifier-based systems are tricky. They're generally weak, they're out of our control, and they're a hassle to manage and to update. As we start to look at solutions for these problems, we'll describe the basics of what is called a self-sovereign identity system, and a distributed one at that. Sovereign meaning we own it. By distributing such a system on a blockchain, we can resolve many of these tough issues. Along the way, we'll look at approaches to developing use cases and standards for identity management. These use various types of smart contracts like proxy contracts and controller contracts. Finally, we'll examine how blockchain can handle identity in the healthcare space, a place holding some of our most important personal data. Some new initiatives could dramatically improve how research is conducted. These could generate value for the people whose data is used to make scientific breakthroughs possible. For more on identity, see the section on what we call the menome in the new preface to the paperback edition of Blockchain Revolution, as well as take a look at the principle of identity in Chapter 3. In this video, we'll talk about the importance of identity and the difference between identity on the one hand and identification or identifiers on the other. First of all, we believe people, you and I, have the inalienable right to establish our own identities. We also have the right to capture and control our own data that constitute these identities. That's not the case right now. Most of us are generating data, the new asset class, for big companies like Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, banks, credit card companies, governments, the big internet landowners. We're doing this like we're serfs growing vegetables for medieval landlords. They make all the money, and if they're feeling generous, they let us keep a couple of cabbages. Call it digital feudalism, an earmark of the first era of the internet. Mind you, during feudalism, the landlords and nobility did provide a valuable service, as do the big technology companies today. But in hindsight, there was a better economic system to be had. The issue facing today's landlords is whether to embrace change and become the equivalent of the British nobility, or to fight change and face the fate of Marie Antoinette and the French rulers. The second era of the internet, based on blockchain, will bring about a new economy for data, this new asset class of the digital age. Largely because blockchain technology enables us to establish and own identities. It also enables us to enforce these identities in any context. And once we can do that, we can create a virtual black box for storing our own personal data. Now that's a revolutionary idea, and I mean that literally. Like any revolution, it upends the balance of power. By creating the virtual you and safeguarding this virtual you through blockchain technologies, you can take back control over your own identity, the data you create, and all the related rights of privacy, publicity, and property. We can recapture our identities and manage them for ourselves to help use this data to plan our lives, to monetize it if we want, and to protect our rights to privacy. Self-sovereign means that it's under your individual control. It's also inalienable, meaning it can't be separated from you. No one can steal it. And since it's not assigned by a central authority, no authority can take it away. It must be recognized and enforceable in any context, whether that's doing business online or identifying yourself in a real-world situation like boarding a plane. And when it comes to capturing our own data, some of us are already doing that with personal devices like Fitbits. We're sort of citizen scientists. We're quantifying our physical activity through Fitbits, and we're quantifying our online activity through internet browsers. We're learning a lot more about ourselves. More people are becoming interested enough in their own data to be interested in taking control of it and to using it for ourselves and for the greater good. We make what we think is an important distinction between identifiers and identity. Identifiers are simply what we use to participate in large centralized systems like Gmail or the Veterans Benefits Administration. They identify who we are, and we collect a lot of identifiers in our lifetime. Some of them are enduring, like a social security number. Others are more transitory, an employee ID, student ID. And some are inherent to us, like our fingerprint. Others we select, like usernames or a password. And still others are assigned to us. And as we use them, they all generate personal data. These are not our identities, however. Our identities are the whole of us. They're something we experience and reveal to others selectively over time. Your identity exists before anybody registers your birth on a ledger. Identity is not simply endowed at birth. It is endowed by birth. But until now, we haven't had a means to assert this authority. In this video, we look at the 5 problems with identifiers. There's one big one and 4 others stemming from it. And we know of several identity projects in the blockchain space that are working to solve all of them. The first problem is the biggest, the need for some overarching identifier, like a birth certificate. Before we can get an identifier like a social security number or a driver's license, we usually have to show some original record of our existence with our name, our birth date, and so on. It's often a birth certificate created and verified by a licensed hospital or a licensed midwife. Any copies of this certificate must be notarized to be acceptable as an official record. But getting a birth certificate is actually no small feat. UNICEF estimates a quarter of all births go unrecorded worldwide. And not getting a birth certificate can have life-shattering consequences. Children without birth certificates can have trouble getting an education or health care. Without proof of their age, these kids might be married off too young, or forced into labor, or sent into the military. Children are the second most common victims of human trafficking after women. Having no birth certificates makes them more vulnerable and much harder to track down or place in a safe home. And adults with no birth certificates might not be able to inherit property or vote in elections or even work. They may have trouble getting passports, getting jobs, getting bank accounts. The World Bank estimates 1.5 billion people on the planet lack some original proof of existence, and that complicates being able to claim refugee status. That's the challenge Syrian refugees have faced. So it's causing real human suffering around the world, and we need to take action now. Identity is so important, the United Nations has made it one of their Sustainable Development Goals. Participating countries have committed to give every person some legal identification by the year 2030. The World Bank has an initiative called Identification for Development. It's designed to help more people take part in the global economy. And yet, there are problems, we think, with this mass approach. Take India, for example. India has made considerable progress getting everyone an ID. This ID is called an Aadhaar, meaning foundation in Hindi. It's a 12-digit ID for every resident. India documented 99% of adults, and that's having a positive economic effect. The problem was storing all the demographic and biometric data in a centralized database. The system was hacked and 1 billion records were exposed. So the reality of a centrally sourced and government-sanctioned identity is a big problem. That's the first major problem. The second problem is government identifiers are system-centric, system-controlled, and vulnerable to cancellation, to forgery, and even theft. A system administrator can freeze access or change the terms of use or delete our identifiers altogether. This is true of student IDs, healthcare, insurance IDs, land titles, and more. Third, all the personal data we create with each identifier is stored in somebody else's central database. Our college transcripts are stored in some big university database. Our medical histories are stored in a hospital database and possibly a health insurance database, all at the mercy of a central system administrator. That person or that institution may give our data to untrustworthy vendors or sell our data to unacceptable third parties without our permission or even our knowledge. In the meantime, our data keeps flowing to these databases out of our control. Fourth, this identifier-centric system is extremely user-unfriendly. We have to repeat the registration process whenever we get a new identifier, and we provide the same forms of ID. We keep portfolios of ID numbers, usernames, passwords, and the answers to personal questions like, what's the name of your first pet? And if we want to switch colleges or countries, we have to port our data from one system to the next, sometimes for a fee. Porting data is complicated, and the rules often change. And finally, whenever the central database is hacked, we're left to clean up the mess. We bear most of the risk for our own data, but we get none of the rewards of third-party data usage. What's wrong with this picture? Well, just about everything. Consider what happened to Anthem, the largest US health insurer. Its database was breached in 2015. It exposed nearly 80 million people's personal information. Anthem settled a class action lawsuit for $115 million, and then it was hacked again, and another 18,000 personal records were exposed. This is not identity management. This is identifier whack-a-mole. Our identities should be informing how we manage our identifiers. Instead, these identifiers are deforming our identities. If we don't have them, we get the message, you aren't equal in society and you don't belong, and that's terrible. And we can't get a bank account, a loan, or even attend college. But if we do have them, we're told to watch our backs. We're told violation of our privacy is a risk of taking part. We're told privacy is overrated. And we're told that other people can use this data for their own economic benefit. And against the defeatist slogans becomes a means of manipulating us, grooming us, ultimately for what could be authoritarian rule. There has to be a better way, right? Well, there is, and we'll talk about it in the next lesson. Welcome back to our module on identity. In this video, we'll talk about distributed self-sovereign identity systems. But first, a question. Why should any government get to rubber stamp who we are? By letting who's ever in charge of the government control our identification, there's a case to be made that we're giving them way too much power over our personal lives. For one, it's too risky, especially when data breach after data breach tells us our information isn't safe in a central repository. We should be controlling our own identities, free of the country where we're born in or where we reside. Consensus CEO Joe Lubin calls this bootstrapping ourselves into economic enfranchisement. To bootstrap our identities, we need a model kept by the people whose identities it protects. That way, everyone's incentives are aligned. We call this model an identity commons. It's important for all users to have the right to manage their own identities, and that includes making money from their own data. That means controlling who has access to it. And that means making the rules over how to preserve and use the commons. This identity commons needs 4 qualities. First, it must be free of any corporate or government or other third party and their control. That way, it won't be subject to the whims of some large central authority. It still needs to be able to work with these parties, of course. Second, it must outlive us users so we can transfer our assets to our heirs. Maybe will our data, such as medical records, to our heirs. Third, it must enforce their right to be forgotten. On a practical level, that means separating data rights from the actual data, so data rights holders can delete them. Finally, it must be inclusive so that everybody can use it. That means the system must be user-friendly with a low-tech mobile interface and low-cost dispute resolution. Here's where a blockchain solution comes in. The technical groundwork has already been laid. In our previous course, we talked about public key infrastructure. We described how blockchain separates the identification layer from the verification layer in a transaction. We focus more on the flip side of identity, which is about privacy. We talked about privacy by design. We talked about zero-knowledge proofs, where miners can validate transactions and bundle them into a block with zero knowledge about their details. And this is an enormous innovation. It's a system for verifying the truth without knowing what the truth is or who it involves. The path to self-sovereign identity has been a long one. Veteran developer Christopher Allen traced its history from its start with centralized authorities like the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN. It assigns Internet Protocol addresses and domain names. Next came the Liberty Alliance project. That was a federation of more than 150 organizations. And the project was dedicated to setting up standards and practices for identity management. Then came OpenID. That was a way of providing identity across systems. While it was more user-centric, it was still controlled by a central registry. With the emergence of blockchain, a couple of identity projects have sprung up around personal data. We looked at a big one, MIT Media's Lab's use of homomorphic encryption, secure multi-party computation, and total transparency of algorithms at work. It's a mouthful, but let's say two or more people don't know each other or don't trust each other. They can still work together on a computation and keep their individual inputs private. The data user gets access to only the data needed for a computation, but doesn't see the data. Meanwhile, the data owner can see the algorithms used to process it. Likewise, the MIT Human Dynamics Group has a platform for organizing all our personal data and processing questions about us. Let's say a bartender asks, "Are you old enough to drink vodka in this jurisdiction?" You put your thumbprint on a scanner and the platform would answer yes or no. It wouldn't give your name or your age or your social security number or anything else to the bartender, because the bartender doesn't need to know any of that. It just needs to know that you're authorized to have a drink. In an upcoming video, we'll pull all these data ideas together. We'll look at blockchain identity applications and how they work.
I'm really enthusiastic about everything regarding tokenizing assets. Of course, identity is one of those. And for example, then you could bound identity to access. For example, we're very used to having concert tickets. And concert ticket is just a token that grants you access to a show. That's it. But if I lose it and you find it on the floor, you get it, and then that access is being granted to you because that token has not been bound to my identity, correct? So the fact that my identity could be on something as a blockchain and that identity could attestate rights, credentials, my house, or a lot of information regarding to me makes that my identity has two qualities that doesn't have right now, that I have the data and that it could be verified without any third party, which makes it something completely new and completely different because now I have the power of identifying myself without any country. Because if my country goes to war or something happens to my country, my identity could get lost and I lose my capacity to identify myself. Or like I've said, I lost the ticket and I need to identify. I could just go and say like, hey, I lost the ticket, but this is me. They could say, yeah, okay, you had a ticket. So nobody else is going to be able to use that ticket because that ticket is bound to my identity.
In this video, we'll talk about blockchain identity applications. Blockchain users can already obtain digital identifiers through a variety of startups. They can use Civic, ShowCard, Uport, and the Shift network, just to name a few. There are at least a dozen more. Let's consider Uport. Its identifier has a unique and persistent 20-byte hexadecimal string at its core. Hexadecimal is a number system with a base of 16 symbols. The position of these symbols has meaning in math and in computer science. This hexadecimal string serves as the address of a specific type of smart contract called a proxy contract. Smart contracts, as we've discussed, are special purpose code designed to execute a complex set of instructions on the blockchain. They automate decisions if certain conditions are met. The proxy contract lets us sign and verify a transaction, an action, or a claim. They also help us manage cryptocurrencies and other tokenized assets. Proxy contracts can interact with other smart contracts on the blockchain. They can also link to our off-chain data and grant others temporary permission to read or write one of our data files if they're willing to pay us. The Uport system works for devices such as driverless cars or 3D printers. Those things need identities too. Uport also interacts with virtual entities like IBM's Watson and institutions like banks. Finally, Uport has a mobile app for our cryptographic keys just for our convenience and security. Another type of smart contract is the controller contract. A controller contract separates our cryptographic keys from the proxy contract. It contains a logic for identity recovery. This means basically, if your device is lost or stolen, you can replace your private key without having to replace your proxy identifier and all the assets that are associated with it. The Shift system is a bit different. Shift is a blockchain-based network compliant with Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering regulations in the financial world. It helps users who are managing and working with data to be regulatory compliant. Shift reduces the costs of compliance and it increases data security. It protects identity better than traditional compliance systems. Blockchain makes regulatory compliance cheaper, faster, and more secure. Many of these startups are collaborating in the Decentralized Identity Foundation. It's a consortium consisting of Hyperledger, R3, and Sovereign, as well as more established companies like Accenture, Microsoft, and IBM. This consortium is dedicated to creating the identity commons we discussed in the previous video. It uses decentralized identities, blockchain IDs, and zero-trust data stores. The consortium focuses on three big areas. The first is identifiers and discovery. Second is storage and computation of data. Third is attestation and reputation. The consortium's long-term goal is to develop use cases and standards for identity management. The father of the distributed application for initial coin offerings is also working a distributed application for identity. His name is Fabian Vogelsteller. In 2017, he issued Ethereum Requests for Comment, issue 725, abbreviated as ERC 725. This standard specifies an interface for self-sovereign identity. Like Uport, identity resides in a smart contract in Vogelsteller's design. If his standard takes off, as his standard for initial coin offerings did, we'll make real progress toward an identity management system that we can all use. And that is central to the blockchain revolution and the rebalancing of power.
So how would you define success in this really emerging blockchain space?
We think that no one will have to worry about, hey, here's a 60-page agreement for the terms when you get your iPhone. We think that doesn't matter whether it's your private data, about your dating, your salary, in your employment, you will be very comfortable knowing that the data is safe. At the same time, you can still do transactions with people. This is a marketplace where people can use your health data to really fix cancer, really do any of the new AI technology. That is the success of what new blockchain technology can bring to the world.
So really taking these sort of online marketplaces transactions to a new level.
Yeah, I agree. I think for us as practitioners, it's our jobs now in this industry to help it become more mature, make it more accessible to users, and make it driven more about technology products utilization rather than speculation.
Welcome back to our module on identity. Let's review what we've learned. For true freedom, we need self-sovereign identities. Identities we create and control. Identities no one can copy or take from us. Identities where we own and control all the data that we generate. Making this a reality will take time. For all their importance, information assets are often treated carelessly by businesses and other organizations. They're misunderstood and they're often undervalued because information is so easy to collect and to digitize. And because it's undervalued, it's often poorly managed and poorly protected. Strong data governance is essential, and this means managing the incentives for creating and collecting data. The right incentive should get people to use the best practices of data governance. Likewise, large organizations will have to stop collecting and storing customer data in massive centralized databases. They'll still be able to access these data, but it will be under a new regime. We predict that there will be the rise of a new category of companies called data aggregators that negotiate with each of us who own our data to sell some of it to other organizations. We may also want to anonymize data such as our health records and provide these to health science researchers. Other data we may provide for free. For example, you'll want to provide your medical records to a certified clinician should you, say, be found unconscious somewhere. And what should these companies do with the massive customer databases they've already created? Well, for sure it will take some time to transition to a new business model where, for example, we pay for doing searches or posting photos of friends online. As for the legacy data, one solution would be to destroy them after returning all the records to their owners. Another possibility would be to migrate the data to a distributed storage system like the interplanetary file system. Once that's done, the interplanetary file system should transfer control to the creators of the data, to customers. Tough issues, but they fall in the category of implementation challenges rather than a box called reasons why sovereign citizen identity is a bad idea. These are implementation challenges, but we need to move forward. Whichever route we choose, We should all be in control of our own data going forward. We need to recapture our identities, bring them back so that we can manage them responsibly and use this data for our lives and for the good of all. For more on the future of identity on the blockchain, please see the 3rd chapter of Blockchain Revolution, plus the new preface to the paperback edition. And on behalf of my co-author, Alex Tapscott, and our academic partner, INSEAD, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions about this module, please post them to the discussion forum, and we'd love to hear from you. Today's global financial system is very inefficient and it's full of contradictions. And we think that most leaders of the financial services industry would agree with that statement. In this module, you'll learn how blockchain technology has the potential to disrupt core functions of the financial services industry for the better. It could offer real choices for how people and organizations create and manage value. By the end of this module, you'll be able to describe 6 inefficiencies in the financial services industry. You'll learn how blockchain can do better on cost, speed, risk management, innovation, and adaptability. You'll be able to identify 8 core functions of the financial services sector and explain how blockchain can disrupt these functions, cutting out the middleman or causing them to radically change their operations for the better. Blockchain can authenticate identity and assess value. It can handle the moving, the storing, the lending, and the exchanging of value. It can automate the process of funding and investing. Insurance and managing risks become far more transparent on a blockchain, and accounting for value can happen in real time. Those 8 functions should improve corporate governance and responsibility and build a better economy. Next, you'll learn that 4 problems with modern double-entry accounting. Human error is a common cause of accounting mistakes. Lack of transparency allows greed to flourish. People can cook the books to hide their wrongdoings. And double-entry accounting can't always handle new business models like, say, micro-transactions. Triple-entry accounting on a blockchain could solve these problems. Shareholders, auditors, and regulators can access a worldwide ledger to check a company's health and compliance in real time. So please head to the discussion forums if you've got questions. And for more on rethinking finance on blockchain, check out Chapter 3 of Blockchain Revolution. On behalf of my co-author, Alex Tapscott, and our academic partner, INSEAD, thanks for joining us. Welcome to our first video on the financial services industry. Financial services can be very inefficient. Let's talk about 6 things blockchain can do better. Today's global financial services industry is built on decades-old technology, often slow and unreliable. It's centralized, exposing it to data breaches or outright failure. And it tends to reinforce the status quo and stifle innovation. There are 6 key reasons blockchain technology can bring about profound changes and bust up the current industry's monopoly on financial services or cause them to change. Blockchain will give individuals and institutions alike real choice in how they create and manage value. First is attestation. Two parties who don't know or don't trust each other can do business with assurance. Financial intermediaries can no longer claim the sole right to verify identity and establish trust. Blockchain's trust protocol, as we call it, can establish trust when it's needed. It can verify the identity and the capacity of any counterparty through a combination of blockchain transaction history, crowdsourced reputation scores, and other social and economic indicators. Second is cost. Blockchain eliminates vast back-office expenses. On a blockchain, the network clears and settles transfers of value from peer to peer in real time. Its ledger is always up to date. With that capability, banks could eliminate an estimated $20 billion in back-office expenses, according to the Spanish bank Santander. Cutting those costs could mean that banks could offer individuals and businesses greater access to financial services, markets, and capital, especially in underserved communities. Current participants would benefit, but so would scrappy entrepreneurs everywhere. Anyone, everywhere, and anywhere with a smartphone and an internet connection could tap in to the global financial market. Third is speed. A blockchain network could clear and settle transactions in minutes or seconds when it takes days through traditional channels. Today, remittances take 3 to 7 days to settle. This is the global diaspora, people sending money back to their relatives in their ancestral lands. Stock trades take 2 to 3 days, and bank loan trades take on an average a staggering 23 days. The global SWIFT network handles 15 million payment orders a day. The US automated clearinghouse system handles trillions of dollars a year, but those payments take days to clear and settle. A blockchain network like, say, Bitcoin takes an average of 10 minutes to clear and settle transactions conducted during that period. Other blockchain networks are even faster. Innovations like Bitcoin Lightning Network aim to vastly increase capacity, dropping settlement and clearing times to fractions of a second. Ripple Labs Chief Executive Officer Chris Larsen said, "In the banking world, where you have a sender in one network and a receiver in another, you have to go through multiple ledgers, multiple intermediaries, multiple hops." And he's right. Things can fail right in the middle. For each intermediary, there's a counterparty risk, there's a cost, and there's a delay. Shifting to instant, frictionless transfers would free up capital, otherwise tapped in transit. There would be no delay because a clearing and a settlement is the same activity. It's just a change in the ledger. Well, that's bad news for anyone profiting from the float. Fourth is risk management. Blockchain promises to ease several forms of financial risk. There's settlement risk, if some technical glitch blocks your trade. There's counterparty risk, if your trading counterpart defaults before settling, and that's what almost caught us in 2008. And the most significant is systemic risk, the sum of all counterparty risk in the system. This is also known as Herstatt risk. A crisis occurred when German bank Herstatt couldn't meet its liabilities and it shut down. The financier Vikram Pandit said the crisis revealed a significant risk. He said, quote, "If I'm trading with somebody, how do I know they're going to settle on the other side?" Unquote. According to Pandit, instant settlement on blockchain could eliminate that type of risk completely. Accountants could look into a company's inner workings at any point in time, and they could see which transactions were occurring and how the network was recording them. Blockchain would also eliminate the risk of shady managers exploiting the lengthy paper trail and time delay to hide wrongdoing. The fifth advantage of blockchain is value innovation. Developers are coming up with a multitude of ways to define and trade value on a blockchain. The Bitcoin blockchain was designed to move Bitcoins, not really other financial assets. But this technology invites experiments, and innovators are building alternative blockchains for purposes beyond simply making Bitcoin payments. Some want to use Bitcoin blockchain size and liquidity to create spin-off coins on side chains. These spin-offs can be colored to represent any asset or liability, physical or digital. They could be a currency, a corporate stock or bond, a barrel of oil, a bar of gold, just about any asset, a car payment, a receivable, a payable. Others are trying to remove the coin or token from the picture, building trading platforms on private blockchains. Financial institutions are already using blockchain technology to record, exchange, and trade assets and liabilities, but there's potential for far more. And the sixth is open source. Blockchain's nimble nature means it can keep on adapting to future needs. The financial services industry is like a towering stack of legacy systems, maybe on the verge of falling over. Changes are hard to make because each improvement must be backward compatible. As the saying goes, God may have created the world in 6 days, but he didn't have an installed base. As open source technology, blockchain can constantly innovate and improve based on consensus in the network. These 6 benefits, attestation, far lower costs, lightning speed, lower risks, greater innovation of value, and greater adaptability, may transform more than just payments. They may transform the securities industry, investment banking, accounting and auditing services, venture capital, insurance, enterprise risk management, retail banking, and other pillars of this industry.
Welcome back. This video is the first of 2 on the 8 core functions of the financial services industry. All 8 of them, it turns out, are ripe for disruption. We'll look at the first 4 in this video. The first function is authenticating identity and account balances. Today, we trust powerful intermediaries to verify the identity and capacity of other parties in financial transactions. Intermediaries like banks and credit card companies control access to basic services like bank accounts and loans. Blockchain removes the need for these go-betweens in certain transactions. The protocols do the work of verifying that yes, those parties exist, and yes, they own the assets they claim to own, and yes, they okayed the exchange of those assets. So blockchain can perform this function. It will have an impact on any financial intermediary making money doing this. The second core function is moving value. Each day, the financial system moves money around the world, making sure no dollar is spent twice. That applies to everything, from the 99-cent purchase of a gaming app to the transfer of billions of dollars to settle an intra-company fund transfer or even the acquisition of a company. Blockchain can become the standard for the movement of anything of value, like currencies, stocks, bonds, and the titles to assets. And it can do so in amounts big and small, to distances near and far, and to counterparties known and unknown. So, blockchain can do for the movement of value what the standard shipping container did for the movement of goods. It can lower the cost, improve speed, reduce friction, and boost economic growth and prosperity. The stakeholders who stand to be disrupted here include retail and wholesale banking, payment card networks, and money transfer services, among others. The third function is storing value. Financial institutions are the holders of value for people, for institutions, and for governments. For the average Joe, a bank stores value in a safety deposit box, a savings account, or a checking account. For large institutions, so-called risk-free investments like money market funds or treasury bills will do the trick for ready liquidity with a small return. But blockchain means individuals won't need to rely on banks as the primary stores of value. Bank savings and checking accounts could become obsolete, and institutions will have a more efficient means to buy and hold all sorts of assets, including risk-free financial assets. This has implications for retail banks, brokerages, investment banks, asset managers, and of course, regulatory agencies. The fourth function blockchain can disrupt is lending. Financial institutions issue or help issue credit. This can include credit card debt, household mortgages, corporate bonds, municipal bonds, government bonds, treasury bills, and asset-backed securities, as well as others. The lending business has spawned a number of related industries. These perform credit checks, credit scores, and credit ratings. For the individual, it's a credit score from a company like Equifax. For an institution, it's a credit rating from an agency like S&P or Moody's, which rates them from investment grade to junk. On the blockchain, anyone will be able to issue or trade and settle traditional debt instruments peer-to-peer. This will reduce costs and risk by increasing speed and increasing transparency. Consumers will be able to access loans from their peers. That is especially significant for the world's unbanked and for entrepreneurs everywhere. If we can deal with debt peer-to-peer on the blockchain, then the stakes are high for traditional credit providers, rating agencies, credit score software companies, and regulators of loans. Blockchain will transform public financing, microlending, and crowdfunding. Please go to the discussion forum if you have any questions about these first four functions, ripe for disruption. Welcome back. This video is the second of 2 on the 8 core functions of the financial services industry. All 8 of them are ripe for disruption. We'll look at the final 4 in this video. Number 5 is exchanging value, the whole business of trading. Trillions of dollars of financial assets are traded worldwide daily for many purposes: investing, speculating, hedging, and price arbitrage. Blockchain cuts settlement times from days and weeks to minutes and seconds, and this creates opportunities for unbanked people to participate in wealth creation. There are many stakeholders here that could be disrupted. Let's start with investment and wholesale bankers, foreign exchange traders, hedge funds, and pension fund managers. Add to them the retail brokers, commodities traders, and clearinghouses. Finally, there are all the exchanges, their regulators, and the central banks. The 6th function is funding and investing. Investing in an asset, company, or new enterprise gives an individual the chance to earn a return in the form of capital appreciation, dividends, interest, or rents. The industry matches investors with entrepreneurs and business owners at every stage of growth. Raising money normally requires middlemen like investment bankers, venture capitalists, and lawyers. The blockchain automates many of these functions. It enables new models of peer-to-peer finance, such as security token offerings or initial coin offerings, which of course we like to refer to as token generation events. Recording dividends and paying coupons on bonds can also be more efficient, more transparent, and more secure. So those investment bankers, venture capitalists, and lawyers may no longer be needed, at least not in the same way as they were before. Blockchain may transform the roles of audit, property management, stock exchanges, crowdfunding, and their regulators too. Seventh is ensuring value and managing risk. Risk management aims to guard against loss or catastrophe. Individuals insure their homes, their lives, their health, and their businesses. Financial markets use derivatives and other instruments to hedge against the unexpected or the uncontrollable. At last count, the notional value of over-the-counter derivatives was almost $600 trillion. Blockchain supports decentralized insurance models, a reputational system based on your actions, your social and economic capital would give insurers a clearer picture of your actuarial risk, so peers can make more informed decisions about insuring you. The use of derivatives also becomes far more transparent. Blockchain will disrupt insurance providers and risk managers, wholesale bankers, brokerages, clearinghouses, and their regulators. Finally, the eighth core function is accounting and auditing. Corporate governance is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's controlled by just 4 global audit firms. Their traditional accounting practices won't survive the speed and the complexity of modern finance. New methods using distributed ledgers secured by cryptography will make audit and financial reporting transparent and occur in real time. Accounting and audit will no longer be a task we do with the cycles of the moon every month or every quarter, but an auditable, searchable, and verifiable snapshot of the financial health of any organization, all in real time. It will vastly improve the ability of regulators and other stakeholders like shareholder watchdogs to scrutinize a corporation's financial actions. The audit and asset management industries won't be the same. If you have questions, please go to the discussion forum. For more on this topic, check out Chapter 3 of Blockchain Revolution. Welcome back. Let's talk more about modern accounting, how it got started, and what's wrong with it now. I promise this will be fun. Accounting is often called the language of business, yet too few of us are truly native speakers, fluent in any industry anywhere in the world. It is closely related to our advances in writing and record keeping, as well as our invention of numbers, counting, and money as a medium of exchange. The ancient Mesopotamians, the Egyptians, and the Babylonians, as well as the Western Zhou, the Tang, and the Song dynasties of ancient China, each added to the practice of tracking assets and verifying their ownership. Then came the Italian Renaissance in the 15th century. Leonardo da Vinci was known to have collaborators. One of them was a Franciscan monk, Luca Pacioli. Modern accounting was born when Brother Pacioli came up with a formula, now known as double-entry bookkeeping. He realized every transaction had 2 effects on each participant, an effect on assets and one on liabilities. So he made a rule. Each party had to enter both a debit and a credit onto the respective ledgers. That is, they had to make a double entry. Both entries in the end needed to balance, which is why Pacioli created the modern balance sheet. Before Pacioli's rules, record keeping was improvised. No one was 100% sure what they themselves owned or owed. This was an obstacle to growth. Economist Ronald Coase thought accounting was like a cult. He saw aspects of a religion in the practice. The books entrusted to the accountant's keeping were apparently sacred, he wrote, with tongue in cheek. Blockchain promises to unsheath the robe of mystery surrounding accounting and shine sunlight on its practices. We see 4 fundamental problems with modern accounting. The first is greed, born from human nature. The current system relies on managers to swear their books are in order. Yet, we know management doesn't always act with integrity. Consider all these cases in point: Enron, AIG, Lehman Brothers, WorldCom, Tyco, and Toshiba, just to name a few. They've all shown executives at their worst. Greed too often gets the best of people. Cronyism, corruption, and false reporting have led to bankruptcies, job losses, and market crashes. One result is a higher cost of capital and tighter reins on equity. Second is simply human error. Accounting mistakes often begin when Randy in finance types the wrong number into a spreadsheet. This small mistake becomes a big problem once it factors into calculations across the company's financial statements. Sorry, Randy. Nearly 28% of professionals said incorrect information was plugged into their firm's enterprise system, according to the firm Accounting Web. The third problem is accounting fraud. New rules like Sarbanes-Oxley have done little to quell it. If anything, there are new ways to hide wrongdoing. Blame it on the speed of commerce and the growing complexity of companies and transactions. And fourth, traditional accounting methods can't handle new business models. Consider microtransactions. Most audit software allows for 2 decimal places at most. That's 1 penny, and that's useless for microtransactions of any kind. Accounting itself, of course, is not the problem, but blockchain technology could be the solution. We need to measure financial flows. We need to gather, process, and communicate financial information. But our accounting methods must catch up with the information age. In Brother Pacioli's day, audits were done daily. Today, they're done with the cycle of the moon or the course of a season. Now try to name any other industry where 500 years of innovation has actually increased the time it takes to complete a task by 9,000%. If every transaction is available on a shared global ledger, we won't need accountants to translate the numbers for us. And that's up next.
Welcome back. In this video, we'll look at what we call the worldwide ledger. It's a solution to the problems we've identified with double entry accounting. Today, companies record a debit and a credit for every transaction. That's why it's called double entry accounting. And this model has been around for hundreds of years, was the foundation of the corporation and of the capitalist system. So what is triple entry accounting? Back in 2005, financial cryptographer Ian Grigg, he argued the cryptographically sealed record of transactions, essentially a shared receipt, was the same as a third entry, extending double entry accounting systems. Now, Ben Taylor, the CEO of a cloud accounting software company, said Grigg's use of the phrase is confusing. The presence of a digitally signed receipt is not a fundamental departure from double entry accounting, he said. He pointed out a common misconception. Some believe, quote, the writing of each piece of information to the blockchain is actually a third entry, and it's not, unquote. This misconception is unfortunate, but it shouldn't lessen the value of blockchain in accounting applications. The ability to write transactions to a blockchain in real time and between multiple parties is very powerful and maybe revolutionary. A ledger showing the whole history of assets and the relationships among transactions gives us more than a credible audit trail. It gives us a real-time status of all transactions relevant to us. A company's financial reports would become a living ledger capable of being audited, searched, and verified at any time. Generating any up-to-the-minute financial statement would be simple, like a spreadsheet function. We'd simply click on the balance sheet view or the income view or the cash flow view of a company's financial data. Companies might not want everyone seeing these numbers, of course, so executives could grant access only to regulators, managers, or other appropriate or key stakeholders. Industry insiders say that this shared worldwide ledger has several implications for accounting. First, it could streamline compliance and reduce risk for banks. It would mean less accounting work and lower costs for the bank. Simon Taylor of Barclays said, quote, we're basically saying, Here's everything we've done, because what we've done sits inside a system nobody else can see. A transparent worldwide ledger of everything means there could be no hidden data. Second, regulators would have real-time access, and it would sure make a regulator's job easier in holding, say, a bank accountable. Jeremy Allaire of the digital currency startup Circle thinks regulators benefit the most, since they won't have to rely on what he calls opaque, privately controlled ledgers and financial accounting systems to do their work. With a shared public ledger, auditors and bank examiners could have automated forms of examination to look at the underlying health of a balance sheet, unquote. And he called it a powerful innovation. We think he's right. Third, it bakes integrity into the financial system. Christian Lundqvist of Consensus is working on an Ethereum-based distributed app for triple entry accounting. And he said, quote, all fraud would be much harder because at no point can you go back and change your records, unquote. Austin Hill, co-founder of Blockstream, said a public ledger, quote, means you don't have to trust the books of your partner. There is integrity in the statements or the transaction logs because the network itself is verifying it, unquote. He compared it to a continuous audit requiring no further evidence. Hill said, quote, you're not relying on PricewaterhouseCoopers or Deloitte. There's no counterparty risk. If the ledger says this is true, then it's true, unquote. That leads us to 4. The audit business itself is overdue for a shakeup. Deloitte, one of the world's big 4 accounting firms, makes a third of its revenue from auditing. Deloitte's Eric Piscini said to us, quote, today we spend a lot of time auditing companies and we charge fees accordingly. Tomorrow, if that process is completely streamlined because there's a timestamp in the blockchain, it changes the way that we audit companies, unquote. We think it can eliminate the need for audits altogether, or audits in the traditional sense, where a company comes in and takes a sample of what's occurred. There is no sample because you're looking at the population of all data, and you don't need to do it at the end of the year because it can be real time. Audit is by definition a backward-looking process. Creating a complete picture of a company's financial state by piecing together its financial statements is like turning a hamburger into a cow. On the other hand, the fastest area of growth for Deloitte is consulting services. So auditing firms may need to redeploy their expertise in new services, and most of the smart ones understand that that's going to be a good thing. Many clients are scratching their heads over blockchain. This confusion creates opportunities for advising them on how to manage the technology. Transparency on the worldwide ledger can help companies to increase value. There's a startup called Subledger, and it's targeting the accounting industry for that reason. Tom Marini, its chief executive officer, compared modern accounting to watching someone dancing under a strobe light. When was the last time you were in a disco? Well, he says, you know they're dancing, but you can't quite figure out what's going on. And it looks interesting, but it's hard to figure out all the steps, unquote. Marini believes companies will benefit from greater transparency. You get the whole picture. It goes beyond streamlining finance departments and lowering audit costs. It changes how the market values companies too. Marini says, quote, the first public company with this system in place will see a significant price advantage over other companies where investors have to anxiously await the dribble of financial information. Marini believes investors will choose a company showing the public, quote, what's going on all the time, quote, over one where they can see only what's going on quarterly. The question is, will investors demand blockchain-based accounting to meet corporate governance standards? It's hard not to imagine. Many institutional investors, like the giant California Public Employees Retirement System, already have strict corporate governance standards, and they won't invest in a company unless those standards are met. Accounting on the worldwide ledger could be next. Let's recap what we've learned in this module on the financial services industry and how blockchain addresses problems with modern accounting. Powerful intermediaries control access to financial services, but blockchain can perform many of these functions faster with lower costs. Individuals and organizations will have real choices in how they create and manage value. Blockchain can do all of the following. 1, it can authenticate identity and value, so transactions are trustworthy and cryptographically secure. 2, it can move value around the world, currency, stocks, bonds, other assets, and it can move massive amounts of microtransactions. 3, it can store value, replacing checking and savings accounts and providing ways to buy and hold assets like money, market funds, treasury bills, or even land titles. 4, it supports peer-to-peer lending, and this has a lot of potential for consumers, the world's unbanked, and for entrepreneurs. 5, it cuts settlement times from days to minutes, making for efficient exchange of value. And 6, it creates new models for funding and investing, cutting out the middleman. 7, it increases transparency in insurance and risk management. And 8, it serves as a real-time accounting for value, so watchdogs and regulators and auditors can check corporate finances. Blockchain can address 4 problems with modern accounting: greed, fraud, human error, and an inability to support new business models. Imagine a worldwide ledger where all transactions are recorded, permanent, and available as appropriate for anyone to view. This technology should disrupt many incumbents in the financial services sector, and the smart ones will embrace those. And the benefits should be for all stakeholders and companies that adopt the blockchain revolution. So please go to the discussion forum if you have any questions. And for more about this, check out Chapter 3 of Blockchain Revolution. All right, you made it. Congratulations on completing this course. We've covered a lot of ground together, that's for sure. Ground on blockchain as a foundational technology for business transactions that can be peer-to-peer. And you now have practical knowledge in 4 areas. First, the area of crypto assets. You've studied at least 7 types of crypto assets and what it means to tokenize an asset. You can explain what an initial coin offering, or ICO, is, and why blockchain startups are using them instead of initial public offerings. Second is the area of smart contracts. You dug deep on this one. You looked at what they are, how they work, and why they're so important. You can identify the 4 phases of a deal cycle, and you can give examples of what people are doing with smart contracts. Third is this vast area of identity. not just identification. This was one of the most eye-opening areas for me, really understanding our current system for establishing and managing our identities and how it has so many problems. And you've looked at 5 of them. You've also studied how blockchain helps us to develop a self-sovereign identity system that we own and manage. Last is the area of finance and financial services. You can describe the inefficiencies of our current financial industry and how blockchain technology could improve it. You can also list what we call the Golden 8, or the 8 core functions of the financial industry, and how blockchain could disrupt each one of them. And finally, you can explain the benefits of using a worldwide ledger for corporate accounting to automate the bookkeeping function and making auditing a breeze in real time. If you've questions about this course, please visit the discussion forum. And on behalf of our academic partner, INSEAD, and my collaborator, Alex Tapscott, thank you for joining us.